It's episode 10 with Ron at the PA shop in London, Ontario. I've known Ron for a very long time. We've worked together a bunch of times, and I consider him a really good friend. His family is great. They work super hard, and I really respect everything they do. So let's give it a listen. Episode number 10. Tell you how to use a mic.
Yeah, exactly.
And is it Schroeyens? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, it's Schroeyens.
Schroeyens?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's Smith to most people.
All right, let's get it going. All right, we're here with Ron, and I'm going to mess this up because we just talked about it. I say Schroeyens, but Schroeyens?
Schroeyens.
Schroeyens. What's the background of that last name?
Well, I'm Belgian. I'm actually from Belgium. I came here when I was 1 year old. As a matter of fact, it makes people laugh because I came with Holland America. So when I go on the cruise ship, we normally now, because I'm old, I go with Holland America, and they're like, how come this says you're like, how could you have taken a ship in 1957? You know, and I'm like, yeah, I was one. I had my birthday on the ship. And kind of freaks them out every time they have to. Somebody must have screwed this up. That must have been like 87, right? I'm like, no, it's right. It's 57. So I was like Holland America's first, baby on the water. But yeah, no, I was born in Belgium, and in my parents' place in Groenlo, Belgium, and then I came here when I was one.
So what made your parents come here? What was the whole idea of coming to Canada?
Well, I think it was a bunch of things. I think primarily, over in Europe at that time in the 50s, it was pretty tough. My dad was in the army, and it was slim pickings there. You know, my dad lived in a pigeon coop. It almost sounds like it's a comedy bit, but he lived in a pigeon coop, and they converted it into a house. And they had one bed, and there was 5 kids, and they all slept in one bed. I mean, you want to talk about, go back and, well, in my day, the war kind of stories, and you sit back and listen to this stuff, and you're thinking, wow, that's like phenomenal. They all slept like end to end and looked through the ceiling. And he said you could, there's holes in the roof, and you could see everything. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity at that time, and he went into the army and at the Second World War, and he went in and did his stint there, and then came out, and there just wasn't a lot of opportunity. Him and my mom had me. Not such a good thing to be at that point in time to have a child and not be married. It wasn't a big flag waving ceremony or anything. So that was one of the things, was that they needed a future, and Canada looked good. My grandfather was here already. He was working in construction, and he was here, and so he was always come to Canada. And so that's, there was a bunch of things that added up to basically them saying, let's go, let's give it a shot. Let's try this. And they've never looked back. They've been back a few times, but they've never ever thought about packing their bags and going back to Belgium. It's been, Canada's always treated them very well. And, they got work right away in big, companies, and they worked really, really hard. So for everything that they could get, and it's been, literally an amazing love story, an amazing success story. I mean, just the generation back then, completely different than our generation or the next generation, or it's just a different value system back then in everything, in work ethic, in relationships, in everything. It's just a whole different way of thinking, and it's fun to talk to them, because the stories you think you know them all when you talk to your parents. You think well, I know them really well. I know all the stories, but you talk to them and you hear stories, and you're like, flabbergasted. You're like, my God. I mean, I had no idea. You know, my dad used to bike 25 kilometers a day to visit my mother, you know, back and forth on a bike, and not like the kind of bikes we have here. We're talking like old clunkers with like, you know, one speed, not 15 speeds. And that one speed is slow, you know, and oblong kind of tires. And, you know, like, I mean, and you know, they would bike 25 kilometers a day to go see each other. And like stuff like that, is amazing. And you don't hear about anymore. I mean, you know.
Yeah, I think nowadays it's like, oh, you live on the other side of town? Oh, that's kind of far.
Yeah.
It's like,
you guys have Uber in this town? You know, like it's just a whole different. I think it's, you know, the last couple of years is more for me more interesting because I started asking a lot more questions and getting more into you know, their early years and living in Europe and living in Belgium and you know, war times, you know, like when you know, like a slice of bread was, you know, hard to find, you know, and listening to that whole thing and understanding, you know, what they went through. It's a phenomenal period of time. Like what they've gone through is tough. Like it's, you know, people nowadays are like, oh, my air conditioning doesn't work, you know, life is over. You know, these people were getting shot at, you know, like, I mean, they literally were living on the edge of their lives every day. And, you know, it's an amazing story. I mean, you know, where they came from and, you know, where they went and how well they've done and how hard they've worked, you know. I think it's you know, anybody from that time period, you know, they came to Canada and as immigrants and they worked hard. I mean, they built those houses, they poured that concrete, they did all that stuff that, you know, people nowadays are not interested in doing. I mean, kids nowadays are not interested in any of that kind of stuff unless it's automated or, you know, it does it by itself somehow, or, you know, like, you know, back then it was just a good, honest day's work for, you know, I think my dad said, you know, he was making like $1 an hour or something, or, you know, like it was like nothing, you know, but keep in mind, I mean, at that time, in 1960, I think it was 60 when he bought the house, he bought his house for $16,500. Yeah. You know, which is now worth a little bit more than that. Yeah. But, you know, everything's relative, but it's still a fascinating story. So I love it.
Yeah, it's neat. I know at one point with my grandpa George, on my mom's side, there was one day we took him into the studio and just same kind of thing we're doing now, you know, before there was podcasting and all that, we kind of just sat down and chatted, and he told stories about how he came to this area and the different jobs he had done. And you kind of knew about them, but you didn't really know about them until you really sat down and had a heavy talk about it. I mean, how many times do you have a really heavy talk about what really happened and, you know, the more details? And we recorded that. I have it on DAT tape. So now I've got to find a DAT machine. I got one kicking around here somewhere. I'm not sure if it'll fire up or not.
I got one still. So yeah. But yeah, you know what? That stuff's, and it's just been like the last year or so that I have divulged, you know, got into that whole thing. And that stuff is valuable. Like it's so valuable, you know, and it's interesting because now that I'm a grandfather, you know, grandfather for the first time. And then again, in February, I'll be a grandfather again. But now that I'm a grandfather, I'm thinking, wow, we have a girl. We haven't had a girl in the family for literally years. It's like a miracle. You know, we just make boys in our family, so we've never had girls. But anyway, we have a girl in our family. And I thought, you know, when she gets older, she's not going to know these stories. No. You know, and like Grandpa George, I mean, his stories would have been priceless. Yeah. You know, to not have that or not know, or, you know, for Skylar or anybody else to not be able to go back and go, you know, I mean, they might not do it now because they're too young, but to go back and go, wow, that's like, it's literally priceless. Like, and it's the same with my parents. I mean, and I've already talked to them about it too, and about doing kind of a, a video and just sitting there talking about, where they started and how they came. And the story is so fascinating. It's literally like it could be a movie. Like it's so fascinating. And I think it would be a crime not to record that, to have it for future people to go, my God, like that's fascinating. Like it was just really, really, had no idea. We have no idea. The kids nowadays, they have no idea what anybody back then went through. So It would be good to hear it. And not just from me, like, my parents, my dad lived in a pigeon coop, I mean, everybody's, that's a joke and they're laughing and stuff like that, but to hear it from them, then all of a sudden it becomes real. I think that, I'd be digging up that data of yours right away and kind of.
Yeah. There's been times where I think I want to listen to it, but it's heavy, right? Because it's their voice and, I know it's there. And I know one day I'm going to sit and listen to it, right? But I haven't been ready to listen to it yet, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense.
Yeah. So I just, I've just been waiting for, that day where I think, this is the day I'm going to pull it out and take a listen. So, but yeah, I think and nowadays it's so easy to do. You just grab your phone and hit record and, start the video or whatever.
There's no reason not to do it, like if you're, and that's what, my thought there is like, why are we not doing this? Like my mom and dad are, my mom's birthday was yesterday. So she's 83 and my dad's 82. So, I mean, when is it going to happen? I mean, if it doesn't happen now, it might not happen. So, you want to do that for everybody. I mean, everybody around. So, I'm sure your mom and, I mean, your dad's not here anymore, but I'm sure that getting them in a room and sitting them down with the same thing, the stories would have been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, it would have been amazing to hear that stuff. And I think what sort of got me kind of going on that thing was your podcast. Listening to Brian and listening to Jim and listening, and thinking, wow, there was so much depth there that I've never, I know both those guys, and but there's so much more there that I had no idea, I didn't know at all. And, even you spend time with people, but you don't get into that sort of, you don't get in that deep, right?
No, like you get little stories, and even with Jim, the amount of time I've spent with Jim on the road and that, you just don't get, you'll ask a certain amount of things, or you'll hear something will come up that makes you tell a story from years ago. And, but yeah, when I started this podcast, I knew I wanted to do a podcast. I wanted to do one for a long time. And I didn't know kind of what direction I was going to go with it yet. I knew I wanted to talk to music people and just talk music stuff. And when I got Jim and Jim Witter there in the first episode, I knew we would have lots to talk about. And we did. We talked for like almost 3 hours, I think. But it wasn't until after that podcast where I knew exactly where I wanted to go with the interviews and talking with friends and talking with different musicians. And because you do know a lot of people, and the music industry is very transit, right? So you have strong friendships with people that you really don't know too well. And you'll spend some time, maybe do a couple shows here and there, and all of a sudden you just become friends, because that's what the music industry is about. But then you really don't know them that well. I mean, you don't really know where they came from or what's the story. And I think it's good to hear, and it makes the next time you see those people, and if you know the story, there's a little something more there too.
Well, I think the big thing for me listening to certainly those two, because I know both those guys, is that it's inspiring. Yeah. Like I listen to that and I go, yeah, you know what? We're a lot of the things that Jim was saying are the way I feel. And you don't, obviously it doesn't come up in normal conversations, but he's thinking about it, and he those are values of his that are important to him. And I agree fully. So in a certain way, it's very inspiring. And Brian, who I don't know as well, but I mean, we spent some time, we did, I was on the road with Charlie Pride, and we did, so we spent a lot of time in a bus together, traveling and stuff. But, and you know, you hear some really cool stories. I mean, Brian's got a million stories. So you hear some really cool stories. But, you know, listening to it, Brian, go back, I had no idea. I didn't have a clue, you know, and it just blew me away. Like I couldn't stop listening. Like I was literally listening nonstop, and it was one of those things where you just don't want to turn it off. And yeah, it was really inspiring, and I learned a lot. I mean, and again, you know, both Jim and Brian, I found that both of those things, if you were to be an aspiring musician or aspiring in the industry, if you were to listen to that, that gives you some direction. Like, I mean, there's something to be learned from listening to those guys. Yeah. And I even did. Like, I'm learning stuff by listening to those guys. And I'm 61 years old. So, I mean, you know, I was literally blown away. So, I mean, I'm looking forward to all the podcasts that you've done just because of that, you know, it's been
awesome,
great.
Thanks.
And obviously the drummer, what's his name?
Edit. No, Jason Brinkworth.
Jason, yeah. Obviously, I'm a big fan of his, as you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I put that online right away, right from the show, right from standing on stage about 10 feet away from him. You know, a great guy and obviously a great drummer. So that was a really good one as well, too. That was great.
So going back to you, which we're, you know, obviously doing this podcast about.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's all right. It's, you know, you listen to the story about your mom and dad and you know, the work ethic and all that. And, you know, when I look at you and your whole family involved in the production end of things, you guys work your tail off. And that's, you know, you have probably the strongest work ethic I've seen from anybody. And you must obviously get that from, you know, growing up with your mom and dad and that, you know, that must have really, I mean, it's probably, you know, the genes in you, but you guys work really hard. Yeah.
I think it's definitely the genes, because I mean, I think it's just sort of bred into us and that's what we do. And you know, that's the way that we raise the kids. I mean, you know, and I mean, my oldest son was kind of at the shop and working, you know, wrapping cords and doing stuff when he was like 4 years old. It was funny because my granddaughter now, you know, it was a joke the other day. I'm like, well, so, you know, when does she start? You know,
yeah,
she's 3 months old. never too early. So, you know, it was just one of those things that, you know, I felt it was really important to install a sense of worth with everything. So when, you know, kids are growing up, I thought it was important that they understand, you know, the value of everything, the value of work, the value of money, you know, not to throw things on the ground and garbage. And, you know, I would go to restaurants and take my plate and put it back. And, you know, it was a respect thing, but not just a respect for them, it was a respect for everybody. So, I mean, I try to install that with both of my sons and you know, I think it's worked. I mean, they both work really, really hard. We do work hard. I mean, it's stupid hard because, you know, people always think in the music industry, no matter what you do, that everything comes real easy. And it's so far from that. You know, you're the same thing. I mean, you work your butt off. You're traveling across the country. You know, your life goes through all these changes, but you know, from our standpoint, you know, we work 7 days a week and there's no breaks, and my phone is already rang 3 times since this podcast has been started. So, you know, that's just you know, the way it is. And I think, like everything else, that if you work this hard, that then you'll either die of a heart attack, or you will gain the respect, and you'll also reap the profits, or you know, reap something. And I think that similar to the other people that you've you know, podcasted, the same kind of attitude where, you know, it's a full-time job. Like everything you do is a full-time job, and you know, if you do anything, you know, half-ass, then you will not succeed. I think that's where it's come from. You know, my dad always worked really hard. My parents worked in factories. I mean, when they came here, they didn't speak any English, and they had to learn the language, which they did fairly quickly. But they decided to work in factories, and I tried that, but I was horrible at it. I working in a factory for me was just like absolutely. I was an assistant cutter mechanic at Green Giant, and so I smelled like a corn cob like 24 hours a day. It was a nasty feeling. You go home, you couldn't get that smell off your body. It was just like horrible, and people would look at you and frown. And then I worked at No-Sag Springs, hanging bed frames on a paint line, and it was painful. Like, it was painful for me. Now, I'm not looking down on people that do it, because obviously, people have to make a living, and everybody has to do something. But it just wasn't for me. Yeah. I knew that I had to go into the entertainment business. I was one of those guys like Jim, who saw the Beatles on TV and was like, yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm in, whatever. So, my parents got some guy to come over with an accordion salesman, believe it or not. At the time, they were accordion salesmen on the road. And they would show up with this massive accordion. It was like almost bigger than me. And, they were, here, you got to strap this thing on you, and I was like a skinny little kid, and it would just like fall over on it. Yeah. And so, I knew the accordion wasn't going to work out. But my mother, who on her one birthday, we came here and saw Walter Ostak. She still talks about that as one of her favorite birthday presents that we gave her. Anyway, obviously when you're European and you're, a polka is a king. Like, that's, if you're going to be the lead guitar player or the singer in the band, you best be that guy playing the accordion, because he's the rock star. But anyway, so it didn't really work out. And then, of course, they were like, oh, let's try piano in public school. That didn't really work out. So I went to guitar, and it was like, yeah, I'm going to do, I had the Silvertone, Simpson Sears Silvertone guitar and the guitar amp. And I was a rock star in my basement, playing every day and doing stuff. So I started like physically playing when I was like with other guys in bands, when I was probably 11 or 12.
Wow, that's pretty young.
Yeah, it was. Yeah. And we used to take our gear we used to steal these shopping carts. Yeah. And we used to pile the gear in the shopping carts, and then we'd be like 4 of us going to the gig in shopping carts. And that's how we get our gear there. We used to play at East Lions Park, which was not far from where my folks live. So it's not like we're talking miles here, but we would just push these shopping carts to the gig and then unload them and then set up and play, right? And I was like 11 or 12 years old, and we would play a little dance, and that was it. And then I remember playing in public school, grade 7 and 8, doing all the public school dances and playing in bands and playing the old Three Dog Night songs and Creedence stuff and doing that. And at the time, I was then playing guitar. When I went to high school, I went to I was still playing guitar, but I went to see the talent show, and a bunch of my friends were in it, and there were some people I didn't know in a band, and the band that won was called Skid Slippo and the Zoom Zooms, and they were a 50s band, but played 50s music really heavy. Yeah. Like it was like Metallica playing, 50s music. And they had, so I think the drummer, Gary, had approached me about joining that band, because they had literally put the band together for this talent show. And they were like, yeah, can you play the band? We don't need a guitar player, though. We need a bass player. And I'm like, yeah, man, I'll play bass. I don't really know anything about it, but I'll do it. It'll be great. It'll be a lot of fun. I just wanted to play, Yeah. And from there on in, that Skid Slippo band was born. We had broken every record in the city, because back then they had yet not enforced the bylaws where you're only allowed to have so many people in a gymnasium. So we were all proud that we're breaking they can never break our record here, because right after we did most of those gigs, they came in and went, oh, you're only allowed, 400 people in here. And we had like 800. But we did all those high schools, we did South and Weeble and all the local high schools. We played with this band, and we were just young. We were just young punks who, we drank before we went on, and we were a party rock and roll band, So, that was a great period of learning and understanding that, yeah, this is a lot of fun. I love this. If I could do this for a living, this would be fantastic.
That's a pretty cool foundation. I mean, to be that young and out going to gigs, setting up your gear, and learning how to
none of that
play through the
happens
night.
anymore, eh? Like none of that happens anymore. I feel bad for kids nowadays because that's all over, you know. I mean, it was over a long time ago. Like when the DJ period really kicked in. You know, I remember seeing Doug Vardy and Sea-Dog 4 times at high school dances. And, you know, I mean, that was inspiring. Sea-Dog was an inspiring band. I don't think Doug ever knew that. But, I mean, we all in the Skits Level band were like, oh, Sea-Dog, that's a real band, you know. Yeah. And you know, it was like I said, it was inspiring for us, you know, being in grade 9 and grade 10 to see that kind of stuff. And it shaped the rest of what we did after that, you know. And nowadays, that's just not happening.
No, and, you know, it seems to almost come up in every podcast I've done now, almost comes back to the same topic. And it's really hard. And it really does. The DJs really did take over. I remember years ago when our family were playing a lot of dances. We do the whole wedding thing. And I remember we were showing up at this wedding to set up at the same time the DJ showed up, and the parents hired us and the bride and groom hired a DJ, and either one of them talked to one another. So we both showed up to the same gig, and it's like, well, how is this going to work? And it was just, you know, big talking with the family all back and forth. So we just split it. We just did a set, and then DJ did a set, and we did a set.
Did it work though? Like, did it actually work?
I think so.
You know,
because, you know, we made the older people happy, you know, because back then we played the polkas and we played the dance stuff, right? And then the DJ would come and make all the young people happy. And so it kind of worked both ways. I was pretty young. I don't remember too much, but I remember, you know, walking in and it's like, yep, this is an issue.
Yeah, exactly. When we were, and it's funny because if the guys hear this, they'll laugh for sure. Blame ours and those guys. But we did a gig in Windsor. This was in the 80s, of course. We did a gig in Windsor, and we went in there, and back then it was, you know, it was basically dancers, strippers during the day all the time, and then it was DJ and bands, and you know, so we went into the club in Windsor, and so the DJ is up there playing away. You know, he starts a show, he's up there playing away, and it's all this dance stuff. And at the time, this is the 80s, right? So we were playing all this dance stuff too. And we thought, we're going to nail this place. This place is going to be great. And so, you know, after he's done, and he's 3 times louder than we are. I mean, he's just like he's the bottom end's pumping and knocking furniture over. And, you know, we go up there and of course everything gets turned way down. And so he's up there, we're up there playing, and people are booing.
Oh,
people booed the band. We got fired the guy told us, you know, don't come back tomorrow. It's just not working out. And we're playing like all this dance stuff. Like we're playing, you know, Freak Out, you know, La Chic. You know, we're playing all that stuff. And we did a Bee Gees set, you know, of older stuff. And we did the Saturday Night Fever stuff, you know, Staying Alive. And we're like, how much more dances can you get? I mean, this guy's playing the exact same material, but he's cool, and we died. I mean, we literally died, and we're like, man, we got canned. The DJ kicked our butt, you know. But I mean, you know, you learn, and certainly at that time, because that was when, you know, it was 6 days a week with a matinee, and you were working all the time, and every city was different. You know, Northern Ontario was different. You know, everything was different as far as where you played. You know, I remember Tragically Hip got fired from the Ride Out on the Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't remember exactly what day it was, but they got canned because he didn't like them. They don't play any songs that anybody knows. Yeah. So he fired them. I was like, you got to be kidding me. You know, I mean, the Tragically Hip got fired on a Wednesday at the Ride Out. That's awesome.
So, where'd you move when you finished with your high school and all that? Where'd you go from there after high school?
after high school, I mean, I think I worked for a bit. Going through high school, I worked for I don't know what they're called now, but at the time they were the Public Utilities Commission, or PUC. So, I started in the pool staff in the summertime, and then it was great because when you're a musician and then you're hanging around all the good-looking lifeguard girls, it was a perfect mix for me at that point in time. Yeah. And then so during that period, I kept on doing that. And then I in the wintertime, of course, when you're working for the PUC, you go into the arenas, and that's what I did. So that I learned how to drive Zamboni, and I went into the rinks and did that. So I went to school, and then I did that. I drove Zamboni on the weekend, did the weekend shifts in different Argyle Arena and Silverwoods Arena, and all different arenas. And that was a great way of going through school. I worked out, I made a few bucks. I was always a guy that had to work. I had to do something. I had to be busy. I had to be doing something. So for me, that was... it was a great job, and I was surrounded by really good people, and so it was inspiring to go in all the time. I never really thought any of it was work. I always thought it was great. So at the end of that whole thing, it was going on the road. I mean, it was playing in bar bands and going out and traveling and doing that whole thing. So we just packed our bags and away we went, and did that for I think 4 years altogether. Sort of never came back, and just kind of played. Met my wife up in Espanola, Ontario, in the middle of nowhere, and met her, and that was it. We kept it going.
So did you have post high school education? Did you go to college or university or anything? Or
I never did.
No,
I never did. And it's funny because I've done a lot of work at obviously with production and different things. I've done a lot of work at Fanshawe and Western, and everywhere else. I mean, everywhere. Yeah. When I was younger, I used to bother me a lot. I used to think, I kind of missed it. It's like everything that you don't quite know because you didn't do it, but it's something you think, I missed something.
Yeah, I felt the same thing.
I mean, but you don't know. I mean, I got this letter one time in the mail, and it was from Belgium, and this was before I realized that I'm still a Belgium citizen. Like, I only found that out like 5 years ago. I thought I was just Canadian, but apparently when you're 1 year old, you don't sign over too many things, right? So I'm still actually a Belgium citizen. Wow. They were like, in Belgium, it's mandatory to go in the army. Like, you have to go in the army. It's part of the gig of living there, right? So I didn't go. I'm like 18. I'm on the road partying, and I'm not going in the army. Who'd go? Hell, go in the army? And now, after that, I'm thinking, I talked to a cousin of mine in Belgium, and he's like, how come you didn't come to the army? He said, it's just a crazy time. It's a party. You have a good time. You put your thing in it, and at the end, you get a pension. You get a pension check every month, And I'm thinking, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I go in the army? How stupid was I? But when you're 18 and you're full of piss and vinegar, you just want to go on the road and party, and you think you can change the world, and that's your plan. But then you look back and go, the same thing. It's with the education was the same thing. Looking back, going, what would I have done? I don't know. It's hard to say.
I felt the same thing when I finished high school, because I knew exactly what I wanted to do right then, and there wasn't anything out there that really... Fanshawe had its recording course, but it's kind of at the beginning stages, and I already recorded my own album and a couple other albums, and so I've been through the process. I've already actually recorded albums, and I said, that's not going to really... I'm not sure if I'm going to get anything from that. I'd rather go somewhere and learn from people who are actually in the business already. And that's what I did. Worked with Rick Hutt and went to Cedar Tree. And that was the best thing for me. But I think a lot of people who are in something that's very artistic, if you can get in or start working with somebody that's in that business, I think that's just far more superior. I mean, if you're able to, and if you're the type of person to really suck in that information, right? If you can really watch and really learn, then it's really great.
I mean, there are people that I know, and I have to be careful because I have to be politically correct here from certain schools that have actually said that and said it to me, and have said it. And I know my buddy Dave Mitchell actually failed the course, but he actually told it to the teachers. He said, like, I've been in working with these guys and making some extra money on the side, and to be honest with you, I've been learning more from them than I'm learning from you, and I'm paying you guys big money. So there's something to be said for that, and it's, and I think that, I mean, I've always tried to give everybody the benefit of the doubt all the time, like young people, or I mean, right away. I mean, me and you have sat in this room and we've had people in here to audition for different things, and within the first 10 seconds we look at each other and go, yeah, it's not going to happen. No. But you give them a shot. I give everybody a shot, and it's the same in everything. It's the same in production. It's the same in players. It's the same in everything. If you've been doing this long enough, you pretty much know right away whether somebody's it's in their system, it's in their blood, it's in their in their fiber, and you know right away whether that and that person is easy to inspire, and it's easy to give them direction, and it's easy because they sponge it, and they just keep on going, and they keep on going and going.
Yeah, and it makes you want to teach them more, right?
Well, it makes
you're more willing to do it.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, obviously, you want people to hang around, especially in my position. You're a production guy, you own a company. You want people to hang around and do the work. But I've never ever. I've never felt bad when people have moved on to other things, and tried to better themselves. I think that's at the end of the day, that's what it is. I mean, I've done a lot of other things in the, the last 40 years or, 50 years of being out there. I've dabbled in a bunch of other things, thinking that the grass was always a little bit greener if I did something different or did this. Yeah. And even though it's come back to kick me in the butt, and certainly financially, and it's always been something that you're always thinking that maybe the grass is greener on the other side. Maybe I got to try something. Maybe I got to do this. Maybe I got to do that. And sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, wow, that was fun. That was great doing. I mean, I remember when we started doing the music video stuff, and you were involved in that. And at the end of it, I was so excited about it. And I told people, I'm like, you know what? If I could do this for a living, you wouldn't have to pay me a nickel. I would eat scraps. Yeah. I mean, I loved it so much. I mean, I haven't really done much of that since then, but it was like a massive art form for me that was just inspiring. Every time you did something, you're like, we're making something here. We're creating something, I mean, nothing in the production business. I mean, we build stuff, we do shows, we do a lot, but at the end of the day, you're pushing boxes around. Yeah. And although it's good and it's great, and you make a living and everybody's happy, doing that part of it, writing music, playing in a band, it's a lot more inspiring. It always has been. And I mean, part of the reason that I kind of stopped playing years ago now was because it wasn't inspiring anymore. Yeah. I couldn't play Mustang Sally ever again. Like, I mean, and I still have friends that play Mustang Sally every night of the week, and nothing against them. I understand it. I understand what their logic is for doing it. But for me, I'd play for free all the time. Yeah. Like, I would play, you wouldn't have to pay me as long as I was doing something I really wanted to do. Like, the music was never about money for me. It was always about the playing and being inspired to play. It was never about, I can make money doing anything. I can make money cutting lawns. I can make money literally doing anything. The guys that were doing this just for money and to drink beer all the time. And I mean, I have nothing against them, and a lot of them are some of my best friends. So, I mean, it's just, they have a path. My path was completely different, and it's certainly at that point in time, I had 2 kids growing up, and my wife, and we were like, we had to put food on the table and stuff, but at the same time, I had to look at the music and go, you know what, I just can't do it anymore. There's got to be something more in this than this, and I mean, you can sit back and analyze it forever and ever and ever. And I've done it so many times because I'm, you know me, I'm an analytical kind of guy. I tear everything apart and then I figure it all out and then I put it back together. I'm on a cruise ship. I'm the guy figuring out how to get off the cruise ship and I walk on the 10 best ways to get off the cruise ship before I do anything, you know. So I tear it all apart and put it all back together again. So, you know, that, you do that so many times, and I'm sure you've done it the same way. You know, you've sit down and went, well, you know, if I did it this way or I did it this way, it doesn't really, you know, it doesn't really help. I mean, I think for me, if I would have, I mean, I went to, you know, we went to Nashville. I went to Nashville. Nashville was a major eye opener for me. Yeah. And that's one of those things that I sit back and go, you know, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, if I had went to Nashville, man, whatever, you know, it would be different. Now, maybe it wouldn't be different. You know, it's one of those what if kind of things, right? But I mean, I loved it there. Like, it's just like, it's home there. Like, when you're a musician or you're in this music business in any context whatsoever, when you go to Nashville, man, you just feel like this is where you should be. You know?
And if if you're in the country music industry, especially, obviously everything happens there. But when you're not there, you really feel like you're out of it, right? You know what I mean? It's sort of like, because everything really happens there, and not being there or not living there or whatever, you really, it's difficult. I mean, you're out of the picture. You can see, you know, why people move there and just stay there, because that's where everything is. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first time we went there, or I went to that steakhouse, which is right downtown there. And I just, you know, we went in there and there were so many people in there eating, and you just looked around and you went, oh, you can tell these guys are musicians. These guys are record people. These guys are publicists. These guys. So it was like, man, I'm home. Like, this is like such a great feeling walking into like a restaurant where people aren't looking at you like you're some kind of a freak or something. Oh, another musician, you know. Yeah. And you just went in there and you're like, oh man, feels so good. Like, it just feels so natural to be there. So that might be the only thing, looking back over the years, that I would say, you know, that was the only thing. And it nothing might have happened. I mean, you might have gone there you never know. 30 years ago and nothing could have happened. But, you know, it's one of those things where you sit back and go, yeah, man, that would have been smoking good back then.
So let's sit back. So you went on the road for 4 or 5 years and did that 6 nights a week, whatever that was back then. And what happened to get you off? Did you get into production at that point? How did you go from being a musician playing 6 nights a week and doing that all thing into getting into audio production?
Well, I actually started in lighting, and there was no lighting in our area. Nobody had any lighting equipment at all. So I would buy these lights from a place in New York. Altman lighting fixtures at the time was a big staple in the industry. I bought all these lights from these guys, and then I would build the controllers. I learned how to build the controllers out of relays and different parts, and we would put it all together, and then I would rent them out. So I rented them out of my parents' garage. Yeah. And when I was playing, my mom would take care of the rental. She would, go and meet people and, do the rental thing, which was, I look at it now and it's kind of funny, but I mean, she remembers it like it was yesterday. So, so I did that, and that's how it started. And then from there, I opened up a shop on Adelaide Street, which was basically a big square room. That I don't even think it had a bathroom. Like, as a matter of fact, it didn't have a bathroom. It was just a big square room. And, we started buying some audio gear and then building that up. And it was like a loading dock. It was like a loading dock door, one little man door, and then just a room, like whatever, 1,000 square feet or something. And it was in the worst part of town. I mean, it was just, it was just terrible. And then, from there, we packed that up and moved to First Street, which is off of Dundas Street, and I moved into, I think it was about 1,500 square feet. And, it was more of there was an office there. So it was like, wow, we're moving up. We had a bathroom and an office. It was like moving up. And
so what type of production and gigs Like what type of things were you doing at that point?
Well, anything, really, anything that was, anybody that was calling, any of the gigs that were coming up, any of the band stuff. Now, keep in mind, a lot of bands were playing on the road. I mean, that's what I was doing, right? They were playing on the road, so they would pack up a sound system, and I remember Raucous, Boris, Boris Novosel played in a band called Raucous, and they would rented a system from me, and they would pack it up in a 5-ton truck and drive all the way out to BC and drive all the way back, and they would every week they would rent that system. It was big. At the time, those rooms out west were huge, and so it was like a massive pile of gear at the time. Yeah. Nothing like in today's standards as far as no flying arrays or nothing like that. It was all just boxes that you piled up.
But everything was, speakers are big, subs are big.
Yeah, everything was big and heavy and got pushed in the boxes, and it was and that was what ended up happening. We just ended up sending out these rigs on the road, and for a while there, I think we had 5 or 6 rigs I had on the road, just traveling all the time. So, and then we do whatever was in town, whatever shows came to Centennial Hall, whatever we could possibly do. It was a little different back then because, we did a lot of our own fabricating. You learned how to make boxes and how to make them work. And some of them were horrible and you'd light them on fire, and some of them sounded amazing. We still have some. The guys are trying to get me to get rid of them all the time. And I'm sure they're like, why does he hang on to that stuff? It's just horrible. But we still have some on the shelf, so that's, you learn. It's like anything else. It's like, if you take a course in auto mechanics, the chances are if you break down, you're going to know where to look, or you're going to know how to fix things. And that was the same sort of theory that we had, if it sounds bad, at least I know where to go. I know how to look. I know where to find it. I understand the dynamics of where it was. And I was around a couple of crazy people. A guy named Keith Tackerberry, who was a good buddy of mine, and he was an engineer. Like he loved designing speaker cabinets. And so it was inspiring, again, to be around people like that, because you're always, well, if you do this and you make this a conical flare, then we can get 60 degrees out of here. This will be a long throw because we can do this. So it was all sorts of stuff that you were like, let's do it, and the sales guys were banging on the door all the time going, oh, you can just buy my stuff. And it's like, well, no, because first off, it's 10 times the amount of money. Yeah. We're making our money, return on investment way quicker. And then, and we're learning something. You can go up to their stuff and go, yeah, you know what, you kind of did this wrong. You didn't do this. We learned how to fiberglass. You learn how to do stuff that, I would never have learned in the past. I got pictures of guys sanding speakers in parking lots and painting, and, it was good. It was really good to get get in there and get your hands dirty and understand how things worked. And I think if a lot more people would do that, then they would sort of get it more, Yeah. Now we don't do that anymore. Obviously, things have changed, and, back then, and people would be like, oh, you got your homemade speakers, and
but it didn't matter as much back then. The name wasn't a big deal. I remember touring lots when I was young, and lots of people made their own boxes across the country, and you'd see it a lot. And you weren't, as long as they fired it up and it sounded good, you didn't care what the name was.
No, and I think we did, and I think that we learned a lot because of it. You learned sort of how things worked because of the fact that you put it together. So when things changed, DBX came out with these new processors and they do this, and you're like, oh, let's try that. So you try that and you go, oh, that sounds way better. We better go that direction. And then you realize, oh, what about this, Clark Technique just came out with this unit. It's way more expensive, but let's try it out. Oh, it just blows the DBX out of the water. Let's get that, So, if you were to have bought that package thing, you would never have learned that, by making these changes or by doing these improvements or by looking at this differently, that you learn as you go. And that's basically what you're doing. So then when you do buy, you buy smarter. You look at it and you buy smarter, and I think down the road that was smart. You couldn't do that anymore. Like that just couldn't fly anymore. Like, nobody would use the stuff now. People would be like, yeah, no, if it doesn't have a name on it, I can imagine taking that stuff out to do a Blue Rodeo show and have them go, Yeah, that's not gonna fly, man.
No.
I mean, and then everything's advanced. I mean, everybody calls, we all talk, we
Yeah.
we send out lists. I mean, you do the same thing. So, I mean, every single thing that is out there is advanced, and if you don't have what people want, you're not going to work.
Yeah, and back then it was like, okay, we need a PA, and we need some lights, we need some monitors, and that was kind of the list, right?
Yeah,
I mean, to some degree, it was like, we're playing this room. We need a. I remember, advancing shows really early, and it would be more, okay, the room seats 500, and this is what the band is. We need a PA that will, fill room for 500 people, and it wasn't, okay, we need this particular speaker, we need a line array of some sort, and this is the console we need. It was like, okay, we need a 24 channel console, and we need a PA that will fit, will fill a room for 500 people. And I remember that was kind of the list at one point. It wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, it was, people, they did have their, I mean, it was like, Soundcraft ruled the roost at that time, with consoles, and people, if you didn't have a Soundcraft console, you were pretty much the, well, you have a Studio Master. No, it's got to be a Soundcraft, So there was still a bit of that going on. But for the most part, it was like, like turn it on and we'll get some sound coming out of it. And if it sounds good, then we're good. If it doesn't sound good, then we're going to start tearing your system apart and trying to figure out how we can make it better.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of that going on, and for a lot of people it worked. And it's funny because people they used to use that homemade box thing all the time, and it used to always be a little bit of a bother. You always used to feel like you were a second rate and stuff like that. But I remember a company in the U.S. Who seem to have done really well with their homemade boxes. Clare Brothers, are still using their own homemade boxes, and they're one of the biggest companies on the planet. So it's just funny how it is, and that's just a people thing. I mean, that's just guys not really wanting to give things a chance. But I always did. I mean, I would always love to hear different things when I went to trade shows. Yeah, fire it up. I'd love to hear it. I'd love to try it out, drop it off. I wanted to compare. I remember we did this big EAW comparison one time. I'm not throwing them under the bus, but the guy showed up. He spent the whole day in our warehouse, hooking this thing up and tuning it and trying to make it work and everything, and it just didn't sound like anything. Like, we were like, man, it just doesn't sound like anything. And he's like, yeah, but we've sold a bunch of these speakers, and the guys in Kitchener bought some, and I mean, they're so popular, you should have these. And they were like really expensive. And we were like, okay. So he had to go to his car for something, and I said to Keith, was there, I said, Keith, why don't we just throw up one of our old boxes on top of a baseband and turn it on right beside it, because it's all relative, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, by itself you can make everything sound good, but let's hear what it sounds like besides something else. So we fired it up, and he came back in from his car. Like, we literally fired it up in like 30 seconds or 60 seconds. We piled all this stuff up, plugged it in, and he's like, oh, well, what's all this stuff? And I said, well, it's just stuff that we built and we've been using over the years, and we fired it up, and we blew it away. We blew the stuff away. And he was like, and he just said, so I guess this means you guys aren't going to buy anything. And it's like, no, probably not. I mean, come back when you got something different. But I mean, there's just no point. If it's not going to be better than what we already have, there's no real point in making the change, right? So, I mean, yeah, I get it. It's a big name and it's a growing name, but at the end of the day, you want $10,000 a speaker. We're building these for $1,000 each. We can build 10 of these.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it just had to make sense, and I think that's where we were. If we would have been in Toronto, Montreal or Vancouver, it might be a different story.
Exactly. Yeah.
But we're considered a regional company in London, and we didn't go out to London too far. I mean, we went to maybe Sarnia and Woodstock, and I mean, we went to around the area. I mean, draws in a 1 hour circle, and that's as far as we went. But we hadn't done a Toronto gig. We would never do that. It was never going to happen. Westbury was, Benny from Westbury I knew really well. Was a good guy, and I mean, that was them, man. That was their territory. They were the guys to beat, or not beat, but they were the guys to admire and to aspire to, to really to what they were doing.
It's neat because you think, I know back in the day when I had my own rig, I had kind of custom made box rig, and you got good at making that thing sound good. I mean, you would know it really, really well. I mean, that's the thing. You tweak it and you do all these other things, and you could make them sound really good. I mean, I was always surprised. I mean, I look back now and it's like, I said, God, I can't believe I did that gig with that rig. I mean, it's like I covered a grandstand with that rig, but you did it, at that time.
Yeah, I think the thing is, again, it's the same problem, right? I mean, we did Bayfest years ago when it was still going, and the two of the techs had just come out of Full Sail recording school, and and they were on those SSL consoles. The SSL just came out with them, like literally, like right out of the box. And these guys were on those consoles, and they were flailing, man. Like it sounded bad. Like it wasn't great. And you're like, this is the problem, is that these guys are cutting their teeth, like literally on this band, who is like that band was $1.2 million for that show. And these guys were cutting their teeth on this stuff, and they had no idea what they're doing. And I think it goes back to, playing music, pushing shopping carts with your gear in it.
Yeah.
I mean, you figure out how to make it work, right? Where we had to do that. Nowadays, you don't. If you're good in school and you can graduate from Full Sail, maybe you can get a big gig like that. But back then, you had to learn how to make everything work, and how to make everything sound great. So I remember a couple different things. I remember doing it was a lighting thing, but I remember David Wilcox playing in town at downtown London in a bar, and talking to his production manager, going, "Okay, man, what do you want for lights?" Talking, and he'd be like, "Whatever, man, just some lights." I'm like, "No, just like what do you want? Like 24K?" Back then there was no moving lights; it was all just conventionals, and floors. And the guy, I could tell the guy was getting frustrated by talking to me. So at the end of it, he goes, "Look, dude, David Wilcox doesn't care about lights. If David Wilcox needs lights to be David Wilcox, then we all got a problem here.
Yeah.
Just bring some lights, And that was like a light bulb went up over my head, and thinking, wow, that is so true. I mean, David Wilcox is not Pink Floyd. He doesn't care about the lights. He just plays his guitar and oozes personality and does his shtick, and people love him for it, right? He doesn't need the lights to make it work. And I think that was the same with the audio stuff back then. You learned how to work with nothing. I mean, nowadays it's how many plugins can I use, to make it sound like something. And it's just not the same. You don't start from, they don't seem to start with nothing and having to make it work with nothing. They just start with everything.
Yeah.
And then you're like, my God, you've just completely changed the tone and sound of everything. And not only that, but you squished it so hard that it has no dynamics anymore. So it just sounds like a big wall of flatness.
Yeah, it's as if it was a good analogy there. It's like it's like you're starting with everything, but you're trying to make it sound like you have nothing. Like you're using all these plugins, you're doing all these things just to make it sound like something that's going through like one preamp. I mean, that's all you want. You want it to sound like this old style, whatever. But you're using 15 things to get there, or trying to get there, and it just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, going back and you sort of reflect back on everything else. Certainly when you talk to younger people, or you tell them these stories all the time. And one of my favorite stories was I was doing the Balloon Fest in London doing sound, and I had just done Thundermug, the band, which was a London, kind of a famous London band. They had played it, right? And I had 3 different people come walking up to me at the soundboard, and all 3 of them were like, "So hey, man, that guy, that guitar player, what's he got up there?" And I'm like, "He's got his guitar, a chord, and an amp."
Yeah.
And they'd be like, no, what's he got? Like, has he got his pedal board? Like, kind of how many pedals is he using? No, dude, seriously, guitar, chord, amp. That's what he uses. No, there's got to be a rack up there somewhere. There's got to be something up there. How does he get his guitar to sound like that? No, man, listen, seriously, it's a guitar, it's a chord in the amp. He gets his tone by the way he plays.
Yeah.
He's a really good player. He understands tone. He understands how to get, he's got a little tiny Marshall single 12 amp that he gets his tone out of, and he understands how to play with his fingers. Like, you a certain amount of pressure, you get a certain tone. This mute this way, you get a certain tone. You do this kind of, and you get it. You guys are all freaking out about this guitar sound, and I'm telling you, all I do is push up the fader. There's nothing on that. I don't EQ it. I don't do nothing. I turn the preamp up, I push the fader up, and you guys drool. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it should be with every single thing. If I have to noodle with your stuff a lot, that means that you don't know what you're doing. And you don't know how to get a good sound, Ideally, that's what it is. Some music is inherently easy that way. Like when you do reggae music, everybody loves mixing reggae bands because there's a space for everything, right? So, here's your drums. You got this big kick and snare and hat, and, you got this big thing, and then you've got this big bass that sort of fits in here, and you got a guitar that's got a chunk guitar and organs, playing off. And you push up the faders on your audio console and you're like, it sounds like $1 million and I've done nothing. Like, it's just, I get paid for doing this. It's amazing. And then, you'll next day you'll do a rock band. They'll have 3 guitar players in the band and none of them can play in time. None of them can play in tune. And they're the first ones that come over and go, hey, how's my guitar sound? And you're like, man, like, oh, it's fantastic. What are you going to say?
Yeah.
I mean, there's if people would understand that it all comes from them to start with, people use that saying, crap in, crap out. But I mean, it does start there. And that's why things sound good. You deal with great drummers, I've done gigs where we supplied backline, the same drum kit, right? And the drum kit sounded completely different from drummer to drummer to drummer.
Yeah, completely. Like, it's like you're switching in a whole, I can't remember I talked about this with Jason Brinkworth on his podcast, but NAMM show years ago, going to the Yamaha drum night and sitting, they had about 3-4 kits, but most of the people say it went to the same kit all the time. And every single drummer sounds like a whole brand new kit. You swear that the kit got changed out, and you think it's a drum kit. How different can it be? But I've done tons of those type of gigs in the past, and I'm always shocked. I mean, I can't believe how different this kit sounds. And even here at our theater, I use our house kit all the time, and we're just talking. In our place, it's half room, half PA. Just because it's a smaller room, so you get a lot of the drums from the stage, and then you supplement it a bit in the PA. And but man, it sounds completely different.
It really does. Yeah. It really is the player, no matter what people say. And it's in every instrument, and it's not just the guitar player. It's the drummer. It's the bass player. It's all about how the style of how you play, the tone, and how you approach your instrument, and it doesn't mean anything. The foot pedals and everything. Everybody who knows. Oh. Edit that out.
No problem.
Everybody who knows me will know that I'm not a fan of any of that stuff. But I think that I think if you start to understand that it comes from you, then you'll be a better player. You'll be a better when Jim Woodard plays piano. I mean, it just sounds great.
Yeah,
it's just the way he plays it. He sings and he plays, and you're like, you believe it. You're thinking that's it. You believe it, right? So
if you have a good vocal, this has been my thing, and I did this when I was touring with Jim and doing front of house. I would tune the PA to his vocal, and I've always questioned, because no one ever taught me how to tune a PA. I just went in and made it. I figured it's got to sound good in the vocal microphone. If you can make it sound good with the vocal microphone, then I always found that everything just sat well. I'd always bring up a CD, take a listen to the PA, see if it's kind of close. Always use the Donald Fagen Nightfly CD, because I know what that sounds like everywhere I go. So bring that up, take a listen, and then I always used to call Jim, hey Jim, come on out. And he played the piano. I didn't bring the piano up at all, and I just turned that vocal channel up, and I just sit and listen, walk around, tune the PA a little bit, take this out, take that out. And I found every time I did that, whenever I brought everything else in, everything else fit. Like I didn't feel like I had to hardly do anything.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I do the exact same thing. So, and I think the problem is that you're everything else is easy. Like everything else is easy to make sound reasonable. I can't say good because sometimes it's just not going to sound good because then I'd have to go back on the thing I just said before. Whereas if the player isn't amazing, then you know. But everything you can make sound acceptable, except the vocal mic. You can't make that sound good if it's bad. Like if it's bad, you got nowhere to go. Like I've been on rigs before where I'm cutting and boosting and trying to figure out what's bad, and sometimes I just can't find it. Like I can't make that vocal mic sound good. It just sounds bad, and I'm like, there's something wrong with this rig. New Brunswick is a perfect example for me of at the casino there. I know they're never going to listen to this, so I'm going to call them out. I just can't get anything to sound good, and I ended up talking to the front of house guy for Chicago, and he told me the same thing. He's like, yeah, man, it's painful there because we just can't get. And Chicago is a pretty big vocal band, so we kind of need them. You know, we kind of need them to be on our side. And he says, I don't know why it sounds so bad in there. And you know, and I remember just yanking on all sorts of frequencies, pulling them out, putting them back, pulling them out, putting them back, and going. It's just not. I don't know what it is. It's something inherently bad in this room. I cannot find it. And I also remember when I was out with Charlie. You know, west, we would go into those rooms and they would have the big rigs up there and those big theaters, and the guys would be like, oh, you're going to love it here, man. Our whole rig is simmed and all this kind of stuff, you know. And that's the first thing I would do is just take that vocal mic out and go, you know, hey, check 1, 2. And, you know, and if it sounded like Alvin, and in most cases it did. Yeah,
9 times out of 10, it sounds like crap.
And you're like, my God, guys, you've got this massive rig. You know, I don't say anything. I just kind of bite my lip and try and figure it out and make it work. But what you want to say is like, you just told me this is the best rig on the planet, and I plug one microphone in, and it sounds like Alvin and the Chipmunks. And how can that be? Like, why can't I get this one thing to sound? I don't care about anything else. I just need this one thing to sound killer. Everything else I can push up in the PA, and I'll make it work. Like I'll make it sound good. I'll make it sound reasonable. But if I can't make this one thing sound good, my day's over. Like I don't stand a chance. You've already beat me. I can't win, because that's what people are here for. They're here to hear that song. They're here to hear that voice. They're here to hear, you know, they're here to hear communication, period, whether it be just talking. And if it sounds bad, we're all done.
Yeah, and it happens to be the case more than I like to see it. And I think going back in the day, when you're making your boxes, right? Half the time, I bet you checked them by plugging a 58 in and listening to them.
Everybody does, man. Yeah. Even the big guys do. I mean, I know the big guys. Like I know the big box manufacturers. I know them all. And that's their test. At the end of the day, they plug in a 58 and they go check. And if it doesn't sound good, then they just burn it and start again. That's at the end of the day, after all the sampling and everything you do to tune a system. I mean, now everything's tuned internally in boxes and stuff. So when you get it, it's already, you know, pre-tuned to what somebody else thinks is amazing. And so, you know, that's the way you get it. It's all pre-done. But back then it wasn't. So, you know, it was literally, you know, there's too much volume. We don't have the right, you know, there's not enough padding in the box, you know, acoustic material for it. So the reflection inside the box is too big. Sound's bouncing around. It's coming out. It's interfering with the actual speaker. You know, we're getting phasing issues between there, and like there's so many things that you were listening for, and that were important back then too. But at the end of the day, when you plug that one microphone in, and it didn't sound good, you're like, yeah, we're done. Like it's just, I can't. My day is going to be terrible. I did Bon Jovi at, you know, kind of an off topic, but I did Bon Jovi on at Bayfest, and it was like that too. And the sound guy, first thing the sound guy came up to me and said, "So listen, can you help me out here, man? You got to help me out here. You got to take your bass bins and you got to move them like 20 feet further to the left." 20 feet further to the right. You got to help me out. If you don't help me out here, today's going to suck for all of us. It's just going to be a really bad day. And we're like, yeah, man. Well, you're the boss. It's your gig.
Yeah.
We'll do whatever you want, And he's like, yeah, the problem is the bottom end, right? Which is the same problem I had with Charlie, where, Charlie has. If he hears the bottom end. Huey Lewis now has the same problem. I posted on Huey's Facebook thing, and Huey himself said, hey, thanks a lot, man. But if they hear bottom end, they lose pitch.
Yeah.
It just wipes out everything you've got, and they can't sing in tune. And I've seen many Bon Jovi videos where he is falling out of tune, and people are like, oh, that was terrible. He can't sing in tune anymore. But me knowing, going back all those years and having dealt with that with the actual artist, you're like, well, that I know why. I mean, obviously nobody's working, that's the problem. And that's what the guy told me. He said, like, it's either going to be a fantastic day or it's really going to be crappy.
Yeah.
And if we can't make these acoustic changes to make the artist happy, he said, then we're all going to have a really, really long day. And that's, for me, that starts at the vocal mic, where we just talked about, right? Where that's the very first thing you plug in. If it sounds bad, you're already fighting.
Yeah. Weird thing is, I know a lot of the new guys don't do that. I mean, they'll throw up some heavy music, nothing clean, or like for me, the Nightfly, Donald Fagen, I mean, that's as clean and pure as you can get. You can hear the top end super great. You know if the bottom end's tight, you can, whatever you want. But then you put something super heavy on. I guess if you're mixing something super heavy, that would be great. But if you're just testing the PA, I always find it's a weird thing to listen to. But that obviously everyone has their own way of doing it, and it doesn't mean that my way is right and their way is wrong. It's just the way they approach it. But it's different. Obviously you see it way more than I do, but everyone takes a different approach to that. And going back to what we were saying with traveling to a lot of venues, I'm in and out of these theaters all the time, and half the time I just want to turn up the vocal channel, turn all the EQ off, and just have it sound good, like as a start. And it hardly ever does. And I'm always just shocked, and it's not just a little bit off. It sounds like crap.
Yeah, it's always. And
then you start, dialing and pulling this out, pulling this in, and pulling that out, and it's like, oh man, you just almost go down another hole, and you're just making things worse for you. But
you're losing all your headroom, right?
Yeah.
And you're changing, tonally everything, and you're changing the sound. And I mean, everybody knows that in digital, I mean, you leave everything up, straight up, and you don't mess with it. Then that's your perfect sound. You start, you start cutting, you start boosting and stuff like that. Then all of a sudden you're affecting the sound. I mean, you're affecting it because you're cutting and boosting, but you're also affecting the quality of it now because you're affecting, the ones and zeros. But I think that's sort of the telltale. That's where you can, I mean, I don't mix heavy stuff. I haven't mixed heavy stuff in years. I don't have the ears for it. I mean, I think about it every once in a while. I have friends that do it for a living, and they do it, and they do a great job of it. I mean, at the end of the day, I just don't have the ears for it. I can't mix loud. I would mix loud quiet. I care about everybody. So I would care about the person in the crowd that's going, man, my ears are bleeding. And so I couldn't mix loud because I'd be worried about that, So I'm not good at doing that. So yeah, I'm more into, I throw on my Zac Brown CD that, people are long tired of hearing, but the vocal is in your face. All the instruments are played by great players. Everything sounds really, really good. And it's just, I get a good sense of how my day's going to go, how tonally, how my night's going to go, how my days are going to go. I mean, if you make a Zac Brown CD sound bad, then there's probably a bigger problem than that. But I mean, you deal with it as it comes. I mean, sometimes there's nothing you can do, and you just gotta kind of go with it and do the best you can, right? And but if you can, I mean, it's no use crying about it, because the problem is that people go, well, hey man, like example, New Brunswick there, you go down the hallway you look at all the bands that played there, they got the 8x10s, and there's like every band on the planet has played there. So, me whining to this guy, what is that going to do? I mean, he's just going to look at me and go, what are you talking about, man? Like, look at who just played here, like over the last 20 years, all these bands have played there. Who the heck are you? So it was kind of cool when I got together with that guy from Chicago, and he was like, yeah, because they had just been there. He just came from there. And I was like, hey, you just played in, and he's like, yeah, it was terrible. It was awful. I'm like, oh, thank God. Because, man, for a while there, I thought it was just me. But, it was good that someone else reinforced the fact that it was terrible. And, that's it. So, I mean, simple is always better. It's simple is always better when you're a musician. Simple is always better when you're a sound guy. I watch sound guys. It's almost like it's almost like a show, They take it so far over the top to make themselves look so important, to make themselves not get fired, or make their jobs look so important, that you're kind of like sitting back going, really? Because this is painful. Like, all this is painful. Like, you're not really improving anything or doing anything, but you got these guys convinced that you're the guy with the smoke and mirrors, right? Like, and it's all nothing. It's all fake. It doesn't mean anything. Yeah. And it's, one of the best shows that I ever did was the Sky Diggers, and I'm trying to remember the sound man's name. He was such a great guy, and it was at the NAC years ago at the bar. It's like an 800-seater, 1,000-seater bar, so he showed up, and we're like, oh, yeah, man, how's it going? He's like, oh, it's all good, man. He's like, how many bands we got today? Oh, we got 3 bands. You guys are closing the night out. And he's like, yeah. He's like, okay, great. He's like, so here, I'm like, are you guys coming in to set up and sound check? He's like, no, man, we're not going to do any of that. We don't need to practice. We don't need any of that. He said, I'm going to run through the monitors real quick, make sure that they're all working, sounding the way they're supposed to. And then he said, that's it. He said, every channel on the board works, right? He said, there'll be 3 bands playing before us. I'm sure by then you'll have it all figured out. You'll have every channel working and all the mics will be turned on. He's like, that's all we need, man. We don't need anything else. And then, he went on stage, went through the monitors, checked them all, took 10 minutes maybe, checked the monitors, said, okay, man, see you at 11. And then he came back at 11. And he just walked up, and the guys pushed the microphones in place. The band started playing. Within the first 2 bars of that band playing, that guy had everything dialed in. Sounded like $1 million.
Yeah.
And the band never showed up. They never sound checked. They never rehearsed. They never played for 2 hours beforehand. They never did anything like that. They just walked in off the bus, walked on stage, put their good stuff on, and started playing. And that was it. And I told him after the gig, I said, man, that was so refreshing. I said, you just came in and did the job. And he goes, yeah. He said, they hired me to do this job. He said, I don't see any point in dragging it out. There's no reason to drag this out. They're a rock band.
Yeah.
And we just turn it up and we play. And he said, if I can't make it sound good within the first half of the first song, he said, then they should just fire me, hire somebody else. And it was such a refreshing attitude, because at that point we were like, bands were coming in demanding 2-hour sound checks and demanding this and demanding that. And you're like, oh my God, look at this. What happened here? Like, what's with this guy, And it was, again, a light bulb goes up over your head and you go, this is really the way it should be done. Like, he is 100% right. And it sounded good, and he made it happen. So it was, you learn all the time. I mean, that's the great thing about our industry is that you learn all the time. But you do then see the opposite end of things. You can see the guy that will drag this thing out for 3 hours just to make it look like he's the guy, and he doesn't want to lose his job, so he's going to.
Or they drag out for 3 hours because that's how long it takes for him to get it done. I mean, there's some groups that we've worked with, and I still work with today where you go in, okay, this should be easy. Okay, you're carrying your own little monitor rig. You're doing everything. Should be fine. You should be able to patch in, bring up the monitors, tweak them a little bit, throw up front of house. You should be ready to go. And it takes 3-4 hours every single time. And it's super simple. And I think it just, people get used to, this is how long it actually takes. And you just sit there. I just shake my head every single time. This should be a 30-minute, procedure, and it ends up 3-4 hours every single time.
Yeah,
but some people just get used to working a certain way, and that's the way it is.
You know, you often wonder if it's. I mean, because you don't know the way every band thinks. You don't know. There's. They've obviously been together for a while, or whoever they're playing with. You don't know the way they think. If this is what they're demanding, or if this is what the record company or management or the tour manager or the sound man's demanding. You don't know where it's all coming from. Like, I mean, we just did Bryan Adams in the summer, and there's a 5-hour window there from the time they show up to the time that you can have the stage back, where they set up all their gear and they sound check, and it takes 5 hours. That's a 4-piece rock band.
Yeah.
I mean, what takes 5 hours? So, I mean, I'm not saying anything bad about Bryan Adams. I mean, it's a great show, great singer, great songwriter. Everything sounds great. Like, it's all great, but it's 5 hours.
Yeah.
Keith Urban's 4 hours. We're in at 8, we're done at noon. And, you can have the stage at that point, and it's 4 hours long. Does it take 4 hours? Again, Keith was a 4-piece band on the touring act as a 4-piece band. So you're like, you can make it easy, or you can make it painful, or you can drag it out. I mean, I don't know what the answer is, but I know that if you're worth your weight at all, and you think that that's your job, then I don't see the point in any of it. I mean, when I did the Charlie stuff, I mean, we got off to a rocky start because there's no monitor guy, and there's 6 monitor mixes from front of house, all stereo in-ear monitors from front of house. So I took over that job not really kind of knowing what was going to happen there. But within the first 2 days, I kind of was like, okay, great. So now we're gonna implement this iPad situation. I'm gonna stand on stage with you, and you're gonna tell me what you want to hear. And then we're going to dial it all in. For them, that was like revolutionary. They're like, well, you're going to do that on an iPad? I'm like, yeah, because me at the back of the room doesn't make a lot of sense. So we're going to do this from an iPad, and we're going to make it happen. So we spent time. We played through, 2 or 3 songs and spent some time and got everybody. I would go to front of house, and literally we would do, if we did one song complete, it would be like a miracle.
Yeah.
I'd be like, okay, we're done. Because you guys don't need to practice. I don't need to practice. I can dial you guys up immediately.
Yeah.
And in most cases, if you've been doing this for any length of period of time, I know how to pre-EQ that console based on what I see on stage and what I know, having done it for 1,000,000 times. I can go up there and I can set up the drum EQ, set up the gain structure, set up the drum EQ, set up all my high passes on everything, set up everything before anybody plays a note. They don't have to play a note. All I got to then do is push up the faders and then listen. And then I go back and I make those small adjustments. But 90% of my adjustments are pretty dead on,
Yeah. And I'm pretty much the same way. I think the only thing you end up doing if there's a junky instrument or something, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, I got to make that sound better because the instrument isn't where it should be. And that's not your fault. It ends up being, sometimes it's a crappy whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I can dial a drum kit in. I know exactly how to EQ a kick drum before I hear it. I kind of know what I'm going to pull out and what I'm going to add, where it should sit, gain structure wise, and you're going to be pretty darn close.
You can be pretty close. People are like, oh, I don't know if I could do a throw and go. Those are tough to do, They're not tough to do, man. I mean,
it's tough to do if you want to throw in 20 plugins per channel.
Yeah, that's where us old guys, that's where we kind of sit back and go, that's just not what we're all about. I mean, we spent years and years and years getting the best sounds off the stage that we possibly can. I'm not going to change the sound, manipulate it to what I think it should be. I want to just amplify it. I mean, the only time I'm going to affect that sound is if it's affecting something else. Yeah. I mean, the hardest thing about doing live sound has always been getting separation. It's always been the hard thing. How do I separate all this stuff? How do I separate the guitar bottom end? I mean, how many times have I done these rock guitar players where they're like, oh, I need more bottom end on my guitar, man. I need more bottom end. I need way more bottom end. And then during the show, You just high pass all that out. You just get rid of all that bottom end, because now the guitar is interfering with the bass, is interfering with some of the drums, is interfering. It's just a big muddle of mud, and you're like, you can't make anything out. You can't distinguish anything. You can't. So the hardest thing, and that's going back to the reggae thing, which is the easiest thing with that band, because everything has a space. But with rock music, it's tougher because there's so much stuff going on. There's so much layered and stuff. Some of the country is tough too, because you've got you want to find a space for a steel guitar,
you got steel fiddle, 2 guitar players, and maybe a keyboard player up there.
You got to find a space for all that, right? Charlie used to get mad at me all the time about the steel thing, because I always used to find that space and slide him in there, and you'd always hear the steel, because my mother used to listen to Charlie Pride, and I heard steel all the time. It was always there. So you find a space in amongst all that stuff to put everything. It's not easy. It's literally the hardest thing. I remember sitting down with the guy from Radiohead way on when we were still using analog consoles, and he had a Midas XL 200. And as a matter of fact, I went out and bought a Midas XL 200 partially because of that sort of sit down with him. I still have it. It's still at the shop. But he said to me, he said, listen, here's the thing, is that you just need a console with great preamps. And the Midas consoles have great preamps. And he said these XL consoles, you can't beat the preamps in these things. They just sound so good. And then he said, 90% of what I do after I plug the mics in is all done with high pass filters. Yeah. I don't touch too much of anything else unless it's a problem. Unless I see something as a problem, I will touch it. But he said, if you look at the console right now, most of that console is flat. Yeah. And he said, I use these high pass filters for everything. I get rid of all the stuff so that I can get my separation between instruments. So, I high pass, obviously the drums, obviously the cymbals and the snares and the hi-hats and everything. And he said, I high pass like the guitars all the way up, I high pass all that stuff. Because as even individually, if you think, oh, that guitar sounds a little thin, but as a combined unit, there's something picking up that space in that bottom end, and it doesn't have to be you. You're just muddling it up for somebody else. So, to get that separation is literally the hardest thing you can do in mixing sound. So the whole plug-in thing to me doesn't make any sense if you look at it from that standpoint. It's you're trying to change the sound, or you're trying to do this. It's none of that matters. Like, it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, trying to find that separation. And for me, I don't spend a lot of time listening to every single instrument separately. I want you guys to play. Yeah. Just everybody play, and you just turn everything up, because you can get a good tone on a guitar or an acoustic, but when you throw it in the mix with 15 other things, all of a sudden, okay, well, that doesn't work anymore. You have to high pass it. You got to make it a little thinner. You got to find a different spot for it in the stereo spectrum, and all of a sudden, okay, there it is. And sometimes, the only thing I hate about that, sometimes you get bit in the butt on that one when you oh, now there's going to be a little acoustic vocal solo, and it's like, oh, time to let up on the high pass a little bit and make it sound a little bigger now. But
yeah, but I mean, that's
just easy.
That's so
fix.
easy to do, right? I mean, that's literally like, that's just doing your job, and that's leaning over the console. But you know exactly where everything has to go beforehand. Like you just do. If you don't, then again, it's the same thing. If you think that all these plugins and all this stuff is going to solve all your problems, then you are mistaken. But that's what their kids are being taught. That's what they're. I mean, it's all what they're learning nowadays, is that you have to have the latest, greatest. I mean, these guys that's their job. They're selling you. They need to sell stuff. Yeah. Whether it's Waves or whoever, they need to sell you. They need to sell their product, man. They need you to buy it. They need to convince you that you use my product, it's going to be that much better. And granted, some of it does sound a little better. It might be a little bit better on this thing. But I mean, I've seen, and I've done shows where we have to have this console. We have to have an Avid profile on monitors. It's like, well, what for? Oh, because you're using a pile of plugins. That's why. Because the other Avid won't do the plugins. Won't do like SU48s. Won't do that many plugins. Yeah. You have to, like, why would you need that many plugins on monitors? Yeah. My God, like, you must be really trying to impress somebody by doing this, right? And I remember that, and he'll hear this too. This is, and hopefully he won't get in trouble. But I remember a friend of mine who now lives in Nashville, and was out with Christine Ballerina, and he called and told me that they were in rehearsals, and he was doing the monitors for her, and it was all ears. And he told me that the front of house guy, they were doing, I think, 9 songs, and they'd been in rehearsals for like 3 weeks to do 9 songs. And every song, he had all these plugins, and all he was doing was just pressing snapshotting a button.
Yeah.
He said it took this guy forever, and it sounded horrible. Like it was absolutely god-awful horrible. And he said, that's just the way those young guys go. I mean, that's what they're learning. That's the way that they're being taught. That it's not about not about the music. It's more about the tech side.
Yeah, I saw. I think it was Enrique Iglesias at Casino Rama. I sat right behind the console, like first chairs right behind the mix area. And I sat and watched, and they all during the whole show they were all like talking with one another, and the audio guy would be sitting back on his comfy chair, and I'm thinking, what's he doing? And then the next song would come, he'd lean over and hit the snapshot button, and everyone went, everything would change, and the next song would start, and it would just let it roll. And he wasn't really listening to anything. It just snapshot, next song, snapshot, next song, and he wasn't mixing. It was almost as if it's like being an LD when someone's programmed the show, and you come and you just hit go when you're supposed to. And it was kind of the same thing for audio. There was no input from him at all. I mean, it sounded fine, but it was just weird. I'm thinking, it's like no one's really, they're just sitting, chatting, having a good time while the show's going on, and checking the phone and on the computer and snapshotting next song. So I can't get used to that. That would for me, why are you there? I mean,
and you know what?
I want to mix. If I'm there, I want to have my hands on the faders, and I want to feel like I'm doing my job.
Yeah, and you know what? It's part of the fun of it is that you can create, like what you're doing is you're trying to create an atmosphere for the audience, and you're trying to create, first off, good sound, but secondly, you're trying. So sometimes you actually do things like sometimes you're like, I know the end of the song has got this massive bottom end kind of, and sometimes you're like, I'm gonna give that a little bit of a push, because I know that given what I got to work with here, that I can make this room kind of shake a bit in that bottom end, and it's gonna be very impactful for the people that are watching this show, right?
Yeah.
And you're not gonna do that by hitting a snapshot. Nothing's going to happen. It's just going to sit there, and you're going to roll along. And it's not that people are going to go, oh, hey, man, I thought you might have done something there. I mean, it's just a different way of doing things. And I think that, it's important to just have your hands on it. I mean, you feel like you're sort of doing something at that point, and you're actually sort of controlling the way things go. And when guys change sounds or when everything, you want to be able to move that around and just add a bit to it. And it's very simple. Like I'm not talking anything complex, but it's just a matter of listening to what's going on and going, how can I make this a little bit sweeter here, or change this here, or change this here? I'm not going to change anything with the way they're playing. I'm just going to make the overall sound really pleasant for the crowd. So yeah, I can't, the snapshot thing, again, that's another thing that's never really worked for me, because it's a newer thing. Younger kids are all about it. It's the same with lights. It's the same with all that kind of stuff. It just drives me insane.
Yeah, it is a different way. I mean, I think it has its place, especially when it comes to muting and changing effects if you need to. Yeah. That stuff works good, but
yeah, I think in theater where it's all talking, and you want to mute channels, and you want to change levels and stuff. I think it's great there, but I think in rock and roll, it's we're a little bit more hands on, or hopefully.
So going back to earlier days, you're out renting out your gear, and you kind of stepped up and started doing more in the production of the things. Eventually, where did that lead? I know you got a bit into the retail side and your building that you still have, you have the studio in there. And I mean, where do the things really start branching out?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is, where you're always like, the grass is always greener, or it's my 5-year plan. And I don't know how many times I've said, you know what, I got a new 5-year plan, I'm going to try something, and it's either failed horribly, or it's been remotely successful, or it's done okay, And so I have a million of them. That's the problem. And my sons are the same way. They're always thinking, they're always got a million different things. So a lot of this stuff came from that. The building that we ended up moving to off of First Street, we built. My dad bought the property, and I was the general contractor on it. I was in high school. I was in construction in high school, building construction. So I had a bit of background in high school, and we built some speaker cabinets, man. We can build anything now. So we decided, build a building. Let's try that. And we knew just from having done the research that we would save a lot of money and get it done the way we wanted to. So I was a general contractor on that. So we had built that entire building. And then I moved, we had it set up. We were planning on manufacturing. We were planning on retail. We were planning on doing all sorts of things. Unfortunately, 1990 came around. And 1990 was a really bad year for the industry in Canada as a whole. That was the year that people decided that bands weren't going to play 6 days a week anymore. That's over. That stuff's done.
Yeah.
So 1990 was a really, really rough year. I think I had a broken down truck in Nova Scotia. I had a broken down truck in PA in Wawa, Ontario. I had about $85,000, $90,000 in money that was owed to me. I was never really good at collecting money. I was always a handshake and a smile guy. Which never really works super well, but I mean, it always worked for me. I always liked doing business like that. Anyway, I did we're just in the middle of doing this Tammy Wynette tour, and I had all this other stuff going on. And the Tammy Wynette tour, I think we did 6 shows with Tammy Wynette. And I get a call from Sarnia, Ontario, the Sarnia Arena, the old arena. And the guys are like, hey, so we're all set. Everything's up. Everything's running. Checked everything. Everything's good. We have one big problem. I'm like, well, what's that? Tammy Wynette just drove over the border. She's gone.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So, like, what do we do now? I'm like, well, what can we do? Tear down. Well, what are you going to do? So within about half an hour, the cops were there, locked the place down. I mean, they're like, what's going on here? So the guys are like, well, what's going on? So we had to kind of go through that. The promoter hadn't paid them, and they're like, you know what? The U.S. border, we can see it from here. We're going home, and that's what they did. And so I hung the phone up, and about 15 minutes later, my bank called and went, we've been hanging on to this check for I don't know how long, and there's no money there. This check's going to bounce. We're just calling to tell you. I'm like, I just got off the phone, and they're shutting it down on all ends. And it was a pretty good sized deposit check. And I was already looking at broken down truck in Nova Scotia and broken down truck in Wawa full of equipment. How am I going to get that all home and fixed? And so I was just destroyed. I mean, I was at my lowest point in business and in life, and then I had 2 little kids and had to feed them, and my wife was working, but we had to make it work, and so I called the bank and said, guys, I'm working for you. I start working for you Monday. And that was the plan. So I just started selling off. Because at the time we had a complete graphics department because we did our own graphics. We had an electronics department, so we had wave soldering machines, and I had a full wood shop. I had rolling table saws, these big Italian table saws. I had to sell all that. And we had a metal fabricating shop in there as well. We had semi-automated punch presses and pile of that stuff. So anyway, I just ended up selling all of it off until all I had left was the rental gear.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then they sent an auctioneer in, and he looked at it and went, that stuff's a bunch of junk. You're not going to get nothing for it. And so we ended up buying it back and going back in business, and I was almost completely out of the business in 1990, and then I ended up starting again and built it all back up again. It's amazing when you lose it all.
Yeah.
How you how you get it figured out. How,
Well, especially in this business, it's sometimes you're the last guy to get paid, and it used to be that way quite a bit, and it doesn't take long before you have a few shows to make that happen.
Well,
it's scary.
It was tough. There was a lot of tough stuff going on, and people are, it was definitely, it was tough for everybody. But literally in 1990, the industry changed, and that was the problem. There was no more of those 7-day-a-week gigs anymore. They were gone. So bands are now playing weekends, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and or just Friday, Saturday, and that was it. So the whole thing changed. The whole production industry kind of went through a change. If you were in, again, the big cities, you were then doing the bigger shows, you were as affected by it. But in London, Ontario, you were more affected by the regional stuff and dealing with the local talent. And so all of a sudden it was you were starting over. And it was a big blow to. But yeah, that's what you have to do. You got to pick up your socks and do it again, and that's what I did.
So how did you get out? I mean, obviously you bought your gear back, and what approach did you take at that point? Like, how did you have to change things to keep things going? Well,
I think at that point you get lean. You understand that maybe it's not a good idea to keep going with these 5-year plans because some of them aren't good. So you get lean and you start to realize that that's what it's going to take. You're going to have to really watch every penny. You're going to have to buy smart. You're going to have to deal smarter. You're going to have to do everything smarter. The fear of losing, the fear. I mean, I had a van and they came and took it away, and it's just it's a really horrible feeling. I mean, I can appreciate anybody who's going through it, because if you've been there, you know the feeling, and it's a horrible feeling not knowing exactly what you're going to do. And then when you do start and you do it again, you want to make sure you do not make those same mistakes again. Like it's paramount that you don't put your family through it again. I mean, I didn't sleep for days and for weeks. And I mean, I was worried about how my staff was going to, how are they going to eat? Where are they going to go? How are they going to, it's terrifying. I mean, and it's heartbreaking, and it's a horrible feeling to know that the people that rely on you for whatever reason you're letting down.
So how long did it take after that for things start to really pick up?
Well, I think I was lucky in the fact that Kipling's, the nightclub, was in town, and Kipling's always ran a lot of concerts, and the fellow from Kipling's, Earl Taylor, is a good buddy. We started working with Earl and doing all the shows there. So literally that was it. Like, that was the gig. I mean, that was all it was. It was just enough to literally keep the gear going, and put food on the table. And then that was it. And then it was a slow growth. It was back to growing and back to building and back to doing whatever you can to grow the business. And it was a very slow growth, but I felt pretty good at the time. Like, I felt like, as long as I can stay the course and I don't hesitate too much. And I was still playing too. I mean, I was playing on weekend bands, and we were playing every weekend. So, I mean, I was doing that. And Kipling's was always the beginning of the week. It was always Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And then they had they had the DJs on the weekends. So it worked out well because I was always gigging on the weekends. And then, the Kipling's thing would be great. So you just made it work. I mean, you literally did whatever you had to do to make it work. And then you started adding shows and started doing whatever you could, and then you clean house, you clean up everything. I mean, the Charterhouse location, it's at the time, it's bigger now. We added the warehouse to it, but at the time it was 7,200 square feet, and for weeks on end, I was the only guy there.
Oh, yeah.
I'd be in there by myself, doing everything from booking the stuff to cleaning to everything. I'd be there day and night. My wife would be like, "Are you coming home?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I am, but I'm just, I got paperwork to do. I got this. You're the only guy there." Like, it's a weird feeling being in a big empty building and you're the only guy working there. But I knew that's what it was going to take, and I was, I was determined to make it happen again. I mean, I had, like I said, when you got kids, there's a sort of a sense that you got to look out for a lot more than yourself, and that's where I was at.
Yeah, it's funny because sometimes you look at, getting big doesn't always mean better. And I know here at the theater, we have people come on all the time, and it's like, why don't you guys, build a bigger place, and you could have, we're sold out all the time, and you should be having a bigger place. You could, do whatever. And it's like, yeah, but then we would be in debt, and then we would have to try to get ourselves back out. We spent all this time building our business, and we don't owe anything, right?
Yeah.
The building's ours, and there's a spot you get to where all of a sudden it's like, okay, this is comfortable. I mean, obviously at some points you got to take the leap, and for us, we just don't feel like we have to at this point. It just seems to work. But I know, in production, it's tough because you just can't stick with what you got, because eventually there's a new PA that comes around, or everything changes. Now everyone's using digital consoles. Now, I mean, everything completely changed. I know back in the day when I had my small sound company, and it just got to a point where I was like, okay, either I'm going to have to spend a lot more money and buy a whole lot more gear, or else I have to just get out. Because I couldn't, at that point, my gear was now starting to get old, and I needed to upgrade. But to upgrade was a big deal, and it wasn't something that I was doing as a full-time thing. It wasn't my only thing. I had my studio, I was playing, and I had to make that decision. It's like, okay, I have to walk away from this. But yeah, I mean, for you, people forget how much work it is, how much money it is, and how much time it is to keep things fresh and keep on top of the game. And I remember seeing probably you guys in the 90s. I take a look back at even maybe early 2000s, and I look where you were then and where you are now, and I mean, the growth is huge, but you're almost a completely different company, right?
Well, there's so much going on, right?
Yeah.
So the issue is generally, and I mean, this happens to everybody, right? I mean, and it happens to if you're a race car driver, the chances are pretty good that your kids are probably going to be race car drivers.
Yeah.
And it happened with us too, right? So I have two sons. They're both really smart. They're both really hard workers. They're both passionate people. I mean that's the biggest thing in our family, is that the whole passion thing comes in.
Yeah.
And so that's the problem. I mean, I probably would have been good to just stay where we were. I mean, you are 100% right. The smaller you are, the more money is in your pocket at the end of the day. Your headaches go way down. Your time is more to yourself. I mean, there's just a million reasons to stay small. The larger you get, the more headaches that are there. I mean, I'm the logistics guy at the company, so I rarely even go out and do sound anymore. I'm trying to solve problems 24 hours a day, whether it be scheduling, or whether it be, sorting out what are we going to do here? How are we going to do this? What are we, how do we get 5 transport trucks and all this stuff up to Timmins for the Stars and Thunder show? How do we do backline for 40 bands? And, there's so many details. It's so detail orientated. Most people, their head would explode. But at the end of the day, I have 2 sons. Yeah. And, they decided for whatever reason, this is what we kind of want to do. So, they grew into the business. So, the expansion was, the retail expansion was my oldest son. And, he's taken that to a whole different level now. They have the guitar store there. They just opened a drum store with Rob Manigoni from the Bare Naked Ladies, the drum tech. And they just opened that October 5th is when the grand opening is. But the guitar store is fantastic. It's a boutique guitar store, and they're doing really well. I would have never done that.
Yeah.
And it's funny because Ryan, my oldest son, tried to get me to do it years ago, and I wouldn't do it because I felt like it was crossing a line. I had some loyalties to some people in town, and I felt that was just crossing a line. And though those people were never loyal to me, I always felt that that was crossing a line. So I said I would never do it. And then, of course, as time goes on and they take over the reins, well, those relationships and handshakes don't mean much to people. And so, yeah, you open the guitar thing. And it's, it's doing good. We have lots of other people coming in, and it's great. The drum thing, we'll see how that goes. I mean, I think it'll be fine. The recording studio we took over from Danny Broadbeck. Yeah. Danny is a good friend, and I know he works out at Fanshawe and the recording course there. He just got tired of answering the phone, was his excuse to me. He did it for 10 years. He had a great studio there. I got to sit in on a bunch of stuff and listen to him do mixes and listen to him program drums. I've never seen that guy program drums like that ever. He is a drummer himself, pretty much. And so we kept the studio. I mean, he moved out of there. The place, we didn't know what to do anymore. It was just a big 2,200 square feet of space. And we thought, you know what, let's just make it a studio again. And what are we going to do? Nobody's going to rent it. Yeah. So we turned it back into a studio. We cleaned it all up. We spent a bunch of money on it and turned it into a studio. It loses money every month of the year, every year of the year. It loses money, but it's the nicest place in the building. Yeah. So we just don't have the heart to knock it out and rent it to a plumber or something. But and it sounds great. I mean, it's a great sounding studio. Everything that goes in there sounds good coming out. Aaron's in there now working, and he's been there for a few years now, and he does a killer job. And they got some great clients, and it's a long process. I mean, none of that you're going to be successful. I mean, you don't have to tell you about being in the studio business. Yeah. None of that you're going to be massively successful. And if that's the only thing you're doing, God bless you, because man, you're going to be poor for your entire life. Yeah. But they're a combination, right? And I think that's what they're looking at. Combination of the retail side of things. The retail side also has the installation stuff. I mean, they just did the stuff in Lucan at the arena, put a new score clock in there, put a new sound system in there. We just put a new sound system in at Bud Gardens. They did a lot of the arenas in town. And I mean, so a combination of the retail side and then the installation side. Yeah. They've sort of merged into one. Retail is actually kind of in the toilet now because of Amazon and those kind of companies. And I mean, you can buy a Les Paul at Best Buy, So I mean, it's changed the dynamic of everything. Yeah, it's
really changed.
Yeah. So, but I think what they're doing is we've had to reinvent the thing several times, but I think now they're sort of realizing that more of the boutique kind of operations are kind of where people want to go. You can go to certain places, big chain music stores, and it's just they're just box movers. They just push boxes around in front of you. If you want to go and talk to people and work with people that are passionate about what they do, then the boutiques are the way to go, and I think that they've realized that. So Ryan is taking that over, and he works really hard. I mean, again, same as me. It's a nonstop. 7 days a week. Yeah. When he's not working, he's on his phone. He's texting. He's doing stuff. The social media stuff. They take care of all that there, and it's a big job. But I mean, they wanted to be in the business. I mean, if he was a dentist or a lawyer, he'd probably be far better off. But he wanted to be in the business. So, I felt it was my job to be able to, make that happen. Yeah. And that's what he did. Kyle works in the production side, and Kyle, he's as smart as a whip. And
he's a rock star.
He is a rock star, and there's certain shows we do because he's there, and people have made that pretty clear. If he's there, you got to work. If he's not there, we're going to shop it. Yeah. And that's that's good. That's what you want. I mean, and he does a killer job. I mean, at the end of the day, both those guys are like I said, their main thing is that they're passionate about the work, and probably another 5 years they'll be putting the old man out to pasture, and hopefully they cut me a little bit of a check, and I can I can hang out with guys like you and talk.
So several years ago, you gave me a call and talked about wanting to put an album together. And what year was that? Do you remember?
I wish I could say it was last year. It was, I think it was 6 years ago.
No, it's got way longer than that.
Oh, come on. Don't do this to me. I don't remember what it was.
That's got to be at least 12 years ago.
No, it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah, it's got to be.
I just listened to it on the way here.
Anyway, so, they obviously came to a point in what you were doing that you wanted to get back into playing and put a project. What made you do that? What was that all about?
I was actually inspired. Like I said early on in this conversation, that I became sort of disillusioned being a musician and playing. It just wasn't fun anymore. And like I also said, I'd play for free if it was for fun.
Yeah.
Like if I was excited about it. And I saw a show on TV and Ricky Skaggs and Colin Ray and what's her name? Country singer, great female country singer was in it. Three of them. It was a special on TV. And I was a fan of country music, but I never really played much of it. And I saw the show, and it literally blew me away. I stood there. I was like, my God, that's unbelievable. Next day, I went out and bought a Colin Ray CD, and I went home and played it. And it was like an epiphany.
Yeah.
I believed every single thing that guy sang. And I just thought, man, this is what music was all about. Like, I'm missing it. I missed it for all these years. I listened to this guy, and everything. Some heavy topics. He's singing about a lot of heavy stuff, and everything had a lot of meaning to it, and everything had a story to it, and everything was. And I just, every time I listened to it, I just thought, man, this is like this stuff is moving me. Like,
yeah.
Unlike a bit of today's country where it's just, yeehaw, and we got my car and got my girl. And I mean, the stuff that he was doing was actually moving me.
Yeah.
And I just thought, man, I want to do this. This is kind of where I want to be. I don't, I did some research because, again, that's the kind of Schroeyens family tree that we are. We tear everything apart and we put, we figure it out, we put it all back together again. So I did some research on Colin Ray, and I discovered that he didn't actually write any of it, but he worked with all those great writers in Nashville. And that's when I started sort of going, wow, maybe Nashville is a really cool place. And as it turns out, it was. But, at the time, I'd never been there, didn't know anything about it, other than that's where country music came from. And I did all the research on him and discovered that, he only recorded songs that had some sort of depth to them, had some sort of meaning to them, and that he was, that was his shtick. And he didn't seem to buy into the commercial side of it, or he just did his own thing, and he bumped along on his own way. And his music was really inspiring to me at the time. And then I started thinking, wow, it's kind of like years ago, like when I listened to James Taylor, it was the same kind of feeling, I listened to James Taylor. James sold it, man. He could sell it. And I believe that, Elton John to a certain extent, Billy Joel to a certain extent on that side, it was believable. But, I'd already been through all that kind of stuff, and the Colin Ray thing was new for me. And I believed him. I thought, what, this is it. This is what it's all about. This is making people feel something with music is a really cool thing.
Yeah.
And I believe this guy. So I bought everything he had. I literally bought everything I could find that he did. And then as it turned out, I worked with you and Jim Witter, and we did an opening date for Colin Ray in Hamilton, at the Hamilton Place. And I was like a little school kid. I would have done that gig for nothing. Yeah. And I now as it turns out, also his band wasn't very good. I think we both kind of concurred on that. But
yeah, we just talked. Jim and I talked about that the other day when we were at Hamilton Place, and I loved Colin. I know what it was about that band we talked about. It was, we were laughing because we came in to do our setup, and there was these guys on stage doing a sound check, and we all thought it was the crew sound checking, because they weren't very good at all. And I thought, okay, it was just the crew's just playing, and the real guys are going to come in later. Well, sure enough, the show started, and it was the same guys who went up and played. It was really bizarre. It was one of the most bizarre things I remember.
And it was really hard for me because at that point I'm just like, I'm such a massive fan, and I'm thinking, my God. And I'm watching the sound guy beside me phone it in, and it was so disappointing. Like he's like 10 feet away from me, and I just wanted to put him in a bag and go, dude, I know you're not really interested in this band. You don't really want to do this gig.
Yeah.
Just move. 'Cause I can do this, man. I know all these songs. Like I knew every song at that point.
Yeah.
You know, I could do a really good job of this. And he was just like sitting back, you know, like not paying any attention. And I'm just back there crying. I'm like, oh my God, this is so painful. And, but you know, we didn't. And you were right. And we talked about it as well afterwards. And the band just wasn't great. It wasn't musically, strong, and it didn't sound good. But, you know, what are you going to say? What are you going to do? I was still inspired by it. And that's what made me, you know, get a hold of you and come in here and kick that can. And it literally probably the most exciting thing and the most happy I've been in, 20 or 30 years was when I was doing that.
Yeah. So you came in and you put together a band, and all great guys, really great guys. It was different because you drew from people you knew and that you trusted and knew were super talented, but they weren't necessarily country guys.
Yeah, fatal mistake.
But it still worked. I mean, I think it was a lot of work to make it work. But what ended up at the end was really something unique and something really different. It's still one of my favorite projects I've ever worked on.
Yeah, I think it's there was just so much good about it. I mean, I think it was a great project, and like everything else, you learn from doing things, and I learned a lot. Like, I mean, I learned an incredible amount, actually, and I some of the stories even from there, having spoken with a bunch of the session guys that we had in, and I relay those stories to other people, and it's, again, some of that stuff is really inspiring for lots of other musicians to hear. So, I mean, we were at the time, and certainly even now when I listen to it, I listen to it on the way here. So, I thought we were printing gold. I mean, I just thought that what was coming out was phenomenal. Like what we had to start with and what was coming out, that was where all of a sudden I was realizing, my God, these guys, these guys can really play. They know their stuff. They're great guys, and they know what they're doing. So, I was learning at an incredibly fast pace, what was going on, and. Yeah, it was good, and I thought that, and that's just the optimism in me. You hope that people will pick up on it. And I was hoping that my guys, the guys that I brought in, would maybe see that as a way to go, and would sort of go back and woodshed and do all this kind of stuff, right? And probably not so much. They didn't, which made it tougher on you, because you really had to put the time into to make them sort of come around to make it acceptable. And I think you did a great job. I mean, at the end of the day, Kevin would have done anything. I mean, he would have sang anything. He would have sang the phone book if you would have asked him, and he would have, would have done a great job. He was one of those guys. He's just a great guy that just wants to sing and do the gig. And I think he's still a great singer and a great guy, and I'm disappointed that I'm not playing with him right now. But and Doug is Doug. Doug's got, Doug's still playing in a million bands, and he's doing great. So Doug sounds like Doug all the time, and it was. What was the telltale for me was when we actually went to Nashville with it. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah,
and I thought that was. It was a learning experience for sure, like anybody goes to Nashville would be. But I thought it was interesting that people thought we were like a touring band.
Yeah, it was basically really the first gig for the band, wasn't it? Was there anything before that? No, there wasn't anything.
No, it was the first gig.
The first gig was in Nashville showcasing.
Yeah.
After the album was done. And it was a blast.
It was a really good blast. And what was really crazy? I mean, the first time we went, we I drove and brought the back line, and I flew everybody. We all flew down there. Everybody else flew down.
No, didn't I drive with you?
You drove back.
Drove back. That's right.
And so we, the day manager at the bar, 12th and Porter. It was a great place to play. The day manager and the night manager, both guys. The one guy seen us sort of set up and sound check and do our thing, and then the night manager actually watched us play. Came up afterwards and said, "Okay, tomorrow night, you guys have to stay. You have to play tomorrow night." And I'm like, "Why? What's going on?" Big party, big industry thing. Everybody's going to be here. You guys got to play. You're like, you have to be here for this party. You guys blew everybody out of the water here. Like, it would be criminal for you guys not to play for this thing. We'll make sure that it happens for you if you play at this party. Yeah. And I had to say no. Like, I had to go, no, we got flights. Everybody's going home. We're booked on flights. We'd love to, and that was a bit of a shocker for me because I know we did well, and I know that people liked the band, and I know it was a lot of fun. And I was like on cloud 100. It couldn't have been more inspiring for me to be there and to do that. But to have these guys who really had no skin in the game whatsoever come up and go, you guys got to stay, man. You have an opportunity here. You just blew the doors off this place. You got to stay. That was inspiring too. I was pretty happy with that. Not that anything happened, but I was pretty happy with that. And stopping that project was probably one of the worst things I could have ever done in my entire life, because I think having done so much in the country scene with other bands and production and shows and backline and working with the CMAs and working with the CCMAs and working with all those folks, there was a space there.
Yeah,
there was room for that band, and that band could have done okay. Like, I'm convinced 100%. Not even remotely. I'm convinced 100% that if that band would have stuck it out, we probably would have done pretty good.
It's, you look back at those things, and those are always tough things to know. Like, I agree with you. I think there was a really great spot for that band, and I think it would have fit in that same category of what am I thinking of? Who was the band that you just talked about that you played their CD for sound checks?
Zach Brown.
Zach Brown. I think it slid in that market right before.
Well, Zach Brown gave me hope. Yeah. Zach Brown is hope for all of us old guys that are not super good looking and are old, and all of a sudden Zach Brown's out there and he's playing stuff, and Zach Brown's $1 million act now. So you're looking at all these old dudes that they gave us hope that there is still a career that you could have. It may not be the Zach Brown career, but there is still a career that you could have if you're a bunch of older guys that can actually play. And Zach Brown was again one of those things that was like, man, that's an inspiring band, and I got all their stuff. It's amazing.
It was it's funny because I look back over the years with the both of us, we kind of been friends for quite a long time now. But I think I've told you the story a couple of times, but we met back when I was in high school.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah.
And my high school music teacher, Tim Nichols, used to be in your band, right?
Yeah, I played in, I was in my band at the time, but I did play with Tim for a long time. And Tim, I consider him a very good friend. And Tim was, at the time, probably one of the best drummers that I'd ever worked with. Tim was ambidextrous. And so Tim is similar to Bill Bruford. He can play with any of his limbs and at any thing. And it was amazing. Tim could do stuff that no one else could do, and he was really good. But he sort of had the same fate as the Beatles, right? So his girlfriend made him quit playing, and he got a real job and became a school teacher. So good for you, because you got to reap those benefits from Mr. Nichols. Bad for the rest of us, because he was a phenomenal drummer, and he's a great guy and a phenomenal drummer, and it was that's too bad. It's not too bad. He's had a great life. He's taught a lot of kids, and he's done really, really well. But he was a great drummer.
So going back to then, the first time we met, obviously it was a very casual meet. you came in. I think we were doing some high school big performance with the music department, and Tim wanted to, Mr. Nichols, Tim, wanted to go all out. So he hired you to come in with, sound system, lights, the whole deal. And I can't remember what happened the day of the show. You guys got caught up in traffic or something. I can't remember. Do you remember this at all?
I don't. No, yeah. I don't.
Anyways.
Too much Diet Coke.
You were late coming to the gig. And we're already, I think it was because there was an evening thing. I think I think there was a bit of confusion. I think there was an evening main performance, but yet there was, for parents and whatever, but there was also this thing in the afternoon just for the school. And I don't know if that was made clear or whatever. Anyways,
we probably did. There was probably a confusion on the timeline of what was going on, because generally we're not late for.
No, and you're not. Anyways, and you weren't late, just a few minutes. So I was the only one there that knew anything about PA system or anything. I think I was probably in grade 11 or 12. So I fired up your whole rig and started the show, and then you just kind of slid in, and then I just slipped back into the band, and away we went. And so that was the first time I actually met you, and I remember that plain as day. And
well, hopefully I was a good guy. I mean,
oh yeah, you're great. I mean, what I was really worried about is that you were going to be offended.
No,
that I'd fired everything up.
That's never going to happen.
Yeah, I know, and you weren't. Like I remember being, okay, I'm going to get my chewed out, right? And but I felt a little comfortable because Tim was there, and he knew you, and he trusted me, and whatever.
Yeah.
Away we went. But then several years later, we meet at several gigs, and then we end up doing this album together, and just became great friends, and our families became great friends, and one of the coolest things, probably one of the coolest gigs I've ever done was when the family played at the Ryman Auditorium in Nashville.
Yeah, that was amazing.
And we got that gig, and I still remember the first thing that went through my mind is, okay, I got to get Ron there to mix. And it's like, because I knew I wanted to leave the stage. I was one of like, I love to play here, but I want to mix here just as bad as I want to play here. So I knew that you would obviously do an awesome job, but I knew you'd really appreciate the gig. Some people, gigs are gigs, but I knew you would understand how cool that gig was.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely sort of an honor to really be there and to do that gig, and to, just be in that room. I mean, it's funny, they put that little square there with thing that people stand in that one spot, and this is where you stand, where Johnny Cash used to stand here.
Yeah.
And they do that all day long there. But the I mean, the history there is just phenomenal, and it was good. And I love hanging out with the crew there. I mean, the front of house guy, the house guy there was from Fogerty's band.
Yeah.
And I mean, he had some great stories. I mean, he was a great guy, The monitor guy had just started, actually. I think a day before then he just started. He was with Travis Tritt.
Yeah.
Again, some great stories. I actually had a Travis Tritt story that I had to talk to him about, because I wanted to hear his side of the story, because it wasn't all that great. And he was like, yeah, I was there, and he told me the whole thing. But no, it was phenomenal. And it's interesting because you have in your, when you think of different venues and you think of different situations, you have a preconceived idea of what it's going to happen. And it was interesting because the Ryman is a bit of a tough room. I mean, they've made it work because it's the Ryman, and it's been there for so long, and so many people have played there, and it's all happened. But audio is challenging there. It's a PA system that's split into two, and you're mixing on the top floor, and That's not great, by no means. I mean, the sound man was telling me when they had Prince there, it was like an absolute nightmare. They had to lower everything and change it all over, and it was just an absolute nightmare because they just weren't having it. They just were like, no, we're not having it. You got to make all these changes, and when of course, I didn't have that kind of strength. Yeah. I was just some dude. It's me. I'm gonna mix. But they were very respectful, and it was interesting because I got to ask about it. I'm asking how they, how have you done that? Because when you have a balcony and it's a big balcony like that, you split the PA in half. There's all sorts of phasing issues that happens when you do that, especially with line arrays, right? Either it's really successful or it's really not. And so it was interesting to actually sort of get there and do that, and it was an old PM5D, if I remember right. And I loved it. And I thought you guys sounded great, and everybody loved the show, and it was a lot of fun for me. I mean, it was one of those things you'd never forget. It was a life experience that there's not too many people that can say that they've in our industry have mixed at the Ryman Auditorium, and I can. So I love it.
Yeah, it was cool. It was super neat that you were there. I kind of didn't want anyone else there, so that was
thanks, man.
That was really cool. So, looking at where you now, obviously you've the PA shop has made a huge leap forward in the shows that you are doing now. You really kind of jumped into you can provide basically for anybody.
It's been the last year. We've we just bought the new Adamson rig, and those are all big decisions because you sink so much money in it, and you cross your fingers that you bought the right thing, because if you didn't, you're stuck with it. So those were a lot of and I didn't make those alone. Kyle had made a bunch of that decisions, and he researches everything, like I said. He goes to the factory and tours the factory and gets it. And I mean, he wouldn't buy if it was just a box. He has to buy, with him, it's more the whole package. What kind of service are we going to get? How passionate are you guys, about what you're building? And we don't want to buy something and then a year later, like, we don't care about that anymore. Yeah. We're building speedboats now. So he wants to, put everybody through the process and make sure that we're all on the same page. And Adamson really came through for us a lot. It's about we auditioned their stuff for the weekend of 2017 of Rock the Park, and we had it there for the entire time. And every band that was playing was losing their minds. So that was really, really good. Lady Antebellum was carrying a rig with them. Like, they had it in the parking lot there, and from a competitor. And when they found out what we were bringing, they just said, "Well, we'll just use that. We're not going to bother unloading it, ours, because it's just too much work." Yeah. Ours, and we'd already put ours up on the stage. It was in the air, and at the end of it, the tour manager came over to me and he said, "I'm going to be honest with you, man. This is the best this band has sounded the entire tour." Wow. And all of a sudden we were like, "Well, there's a check mark for this rig now." And then we did Alicia Cara the last day, and she blew me away. Like, she literally blew me out of the water. We were all sort of standing there. The front of house, there was like 6 front of house guys all standing there, looking stupid at Alicia Cara band, and then a whole bunch of kids in front of us. And she started singing, and we were like all standing there with our mouths hanging down, going, "How does this sound this good? Like, how could this possibly sound this great?" Yeah. And the mix was okay. They brought in some hotshot guy from Los Angeles, mixed a bunch of big acts, and they brought some guy in, and he was okay. He was fine. I didn't care 100% for it, but the main thing was her vocal was front and center, and it was good, and it sounded so good. We literally went back the week later and said, "We're in," and we spent a whole lot of money. We bought over 100 boxes, and we haven't looked back since. We had it out with Foreigner for a bunch of Foreigner shows in Canada, and we've had it out with a lot of great bands, and everybody's been the Arkells love it. Everybody's been very, very receptive to it. So, I mean, that's a big leap forward for us, to be able to do all that. Unfortunately, when you're a regional, you have to do that with everything. So you bump up your audio, you bump up your lighting, you have to buy a bunch of new lights. The video, we have 400 panels of LED video now, and you have to bump everything up to keep up with it, right? Yeah. Because that's the kind of, all of a sudden, that's the kind of work that you're aspiring to get. And, you want to do a good job of everything. It's and again, you want to be as, passionate as you can about it all, and do the best job you can for everybody. So, yeah, I mean, it's come. I mean, like I said before, I mean, the younger guys will take over, and eventually I'll head off into the sunset on my horse, and that's what'll happen. So I'm excited. I'm excited for the future and where things go. And yeah, I think I'll always be doing this. I'd have a hard time retiring. My wife talks about retiring all the time, and I'd have a hard time retiring.
Yeah, it's because it's just not a regular gig. There's something about it that's exciting and still a part of who you are, right? Whether you take a quieter role, it'd be hard to say it because you really drive everything there. And I know Kyle's doing a fantastic job, and obviously he'll probably take over that end of things at some time. But I think he'll know that he'd be coming to you for a lot of advice.
Yeah, well, things change, right? I mean, that's the thing, is that nobody's indispensable. So I mean, people have said that to me before. They were like, "Oh, when you're gone, this thing's not going to be the same," and it's not going to be the same. It's going to be different.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to be different in a good way. I don't think it's by any stretch of the imagination gonna crash and burn. But I think it's just going to be a different kind of thing. I mean, everybody's got different ideas, different ways of running things, and I'm pretty open to suggestions. Anybody who knows me knows that I don't get upset too easy, and I'm pretty open to ideas and suggestions. And I respect pretty much everybody, from the guy who starts to the guy who's been there the longest. I have a lot of respect for all those folks and what they think, and so hopefully, hopefully Kyle and Ryan do the same. Hopefully they get it. They understand that that's part of what it takes to do this. It's a business that is run by, we're not making widgets. We're not making things and pushing them out the door. It's a business that at the end of the day, it's about long-standing relationships that you create, and friendships, and respect for everybody, respect for the players, respect for the other people, and the who you work with, respect for everybody. And I think if you get that, then you'll probably do good.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And the tough thing is, being the boss, if you want to say that, and making decisions on buying stuff. I mean, everyone has opinion, right? I mean, I'm sure you go walk around the shop. I could probably ask 5 guys there, what should you buy? What should you do? They're probably all going to have slightly different answers, right? And you have to do what's right for you, right? And a lot, like you said, a lot of this industry is who you know. I mean, and relationships you build, and I think what's tough as a business owner is when you've got employees, and this is for any business, that unless you're the boss and have to look after making sure everyone gets paid, and paying your insurance and paying this and looking after that and buying your trucks and buying this and knowing that, you never know what that's like until you're in that position. And I always say that, you know, even with musicians, I think musicians should always go, if they're touring, maybe for a week or two, be responsible for everything on the road. So here's your budget. You're responsible for flying all the hotels, all the flights, you know, everything, and get to see what it's really like. Because you look at things completely different when you're the one that has to make decisions, and then know that, like you said before, you have kids at home to feed, and you've got a family, and you got to make it all work, right?
Yeah, and I 100% agree. And I mean, we've proven this before, like many times over the years, where you've had musicians who are basically not working, and you know, call you up and go, "Hey, man, I don't have any money. I'm not working, but I'd love to, you know, work with you guys, and you know, makes a few extra bucks." And you get them on 2 or 3 shows, and you sort of watch them kind of develop, you know, and their attitude becomes completely different. And you sort of go, they come up to you and they go, "I had no idea. I had no idea. I have so much more respect for what happens behind these scenes than I ever did before. I had no idea that this is what it took to make it happen." So, you know, I've seen that happen so many times. So I 100% agree that every single guy who's a player, a musician, should be getting his hands dirty, should load a couple of trucks, should pack cables, you should know how the engine works, you know, before you buy the car, because the more you know, the smarter you will be, the more valuable you will be. I say that they don't let me do it anymore now. They don't let me go into the schools and talk at the school level. But I used to go and do seminars. Then the problem was I was just too honest, and they hated that whole honesty thing. Apparently, you have to toe the mark even if you're the seminar guy. And I used to say that all the time. I used to say, "Listen, the last thing I really want you to do is come into my office with a resume that says you're a Pro Tools expert. I don't need a Pro Tools expert, man. That's the last thing I want, is a Pro Tools expert. I mean, if you can fold drapes, you're more valuable to me than a Pro Tools expert." Yeah. Because, you know, corporate shows, I need guys that can fold drape, you know, and not just bundle it up and throw it in a road case in a big pile. You know, that's the thing. So, you know, I always used to say the same thing, you know, get your forklift ticket, learn how to get your AZ ticket for driving trucks, get your rigging license, get your rigging tickets, take the courses, take all the service courses you can, get them on, you know, take everything you can. It's all out there. You know, load up your resume with stuff that's really valuable. Yeah. And then, you know, you can work anywhere on this planet. Like you yourself, Darren Walters, can work in any country on the planet. Like tomorrow, you can start working anywhere because of what you know, because of all the stuff that you're able to do. If all you are is a guitar player who does some backup vocals, you can't say that. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to load up all of yourself with all the skills that you need, not just playing guitar, but, you know, you say tour managing, booking hotel rooms, and taking care of all this kind of stuff. You know, there's a huge value in that. And, you know, until you do it, you just don't know.
Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I think we could do this again sometime and talk more. I think we both have lots of stories and things that we could tell, and maybe things we shouldn't tell. And but it's been a real fantastic conversation, and I really respect what you do and what your family has accomplished, and your boys are great. I love chatting with them, and they're really hard workers, and I know where they get that from, and I know where you get your hard work from. Your wife's fantastic. You're one of the nicest ladies I've ever met. And
yeah, I don't still know what she's doing with me. I've told her so many times that, you know, it's not too late. You can, you're a good looking woman. You can easily find a doctor or a lawyer. You can live a beautiful life. I tell her all the time, but she hasn't done it yet. So we'll see.
No, I think it's a, you know, a complete package there. And as I said, I respect how hard you guys work. I don't think anyone has any idea, what it takes to do what you guys do, and you're doing fantastic work, and I keep seeing you guys just keep skyrocketing, getting bigger gigs, and it's fantastic. We're really happy for you. So appreciate you coming on the podcast. And I know it's about, it's about 20 to 10, and you've got a load in Windsor at 3 a.m. So
leave London at 1, and then we load in at 3. It's a church show, and we're done at 11:30 in the morning. So I'll be pretty burned out by the time I get back to town.
But that's how hard you work. I mean, you're not afraid to do that. So it's very respected, and I know people out there really respect what you guys do, and we hear it all the time. So thanks again for being on the podcast. And anyone who wants to find out about the PA shop and what you guys are doing, I know you have a presence on Facebook, correct?
All over Facebook.
Yeah. And on their website too. On the make sure you reach out to Ryan on the retail side of stuff, or if you want to check out the Guitar Center there. It's a great idea having that real boutique.
It's
place there.
I can't go there because I'm stuck there for like hours. Every time and Boris works there, right? So I go there and you're stuck there because you're just talking about you can't get out of that place. It's just it's tough.
So yeah, great again, and make sure you check out the PA shop. And if you've got any type of show, make sure you reach out to Ron. They're a fantastic production company, and they'll look after you extremely well. Staging, they have a bunch of stage line stages, and anything you can possibly imagine that you'd want. That make sure you give Ron a call, and he'd be more than happy to talk with you. And also, don't forget on iTunes, make sure that you rate and like In Session with Darren Walters, and reach out to me on Facebook as well, Darren Walters. I'm on Instagram, and the website for this podcast, DarrenWaltersPodcast.com. And you see all the back podcasts we've done, and we're just kind of getting rolling. We've got a bunch of things lined up, so excited for the next bunch of interviews. So we'll see you next time. Thanks, Ron.
Hey, thank you very much.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.